We are pain, that's all. We are God.
Hey guys. Part 3 of this is what if Naruto woke up in a different Konoha. The day after a wild party to celebrate the end of the war against Madara, Naruto, the remaining Konoha 12, and some guests, can't help but wonder what happened last night as they wake up in a different Konoha. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe and check the author in the description. Let's start. Chapter 8. When he woke up, the first thing he was aware of was the hard mattress he was lying on and the unnaturally sterile smell that he had come to associate with only one place, during his relatively short life. Why am I in the hospital, thought Naruto. The last thing he remembered was the welcome back party going out of control. And a weird dream with his father in it. A battle against his father. His apartment being destroyed by the destructive jutsu used. And then his mother joined too, with Gaara rescuing him. And it ended with Ero-Sennin appearing and doing that stupid kabuki dance of his. Damn, I was really smashed yesterday, he thought, groggily opening his eyes. He winced at the sudden bright light that blinded him and tried to raise his arms to block it out. Only to discover that he couldn't move his hand. While he wobbled, trying to get up and finding out he wasn't able to. He was tied to his bed with various straps tightened around his limbs and torso. Turning his head, he checked his surroundings. His bed was the only furniture, placed exactly at the center of the room, under a set of very bright spotlights. It was a windowless room. Did the hospital even have windowless rooms? Seems that Sakura-chan and Tsunade-chan don't want me to leave the hospital. Again. Then he noticed the seal tags covering his body, and the metal door, and the security cameras, watching him with cold, electronic eyes. What the hell? He shouted. This time, those two had really gone overboard, even if it was for his own good. Naruto started to struggle under his bindings, in vain. Normally he would be able to free himself quite easily, but those straps just didn't want to snap. He was starting to get quite worried. Now that he was more alert, he could feel how wrong the whole situation was. And the smell, it was not the smell of the hospital. It was similar enough, but the antiseptic odor seemed to be mixed with other distant, old smells. Like blood. And fear. Naruto's hair bristled on the back of his head. This was really, really wrong. Oi! He yelled at one of the security cameras. This joke has gone on long enough, Bachan. Let me out. I'm fine. Of course, no response came. After a few minutes, he started to struggle again to free himself, but he realized after a while that it was a futile attempt. Forcing himself to relax and calm down, he started to think about a possible course of action. He couldn't free himself because the bands were too tight and wouldn't break. He couldn't use jutsu because of the seals, or at least he thought so, and he couldn't do hand signs since his hands were bound too far apart anyway. He didn't want to shout because he didn't want to be treated like a child, just in case it actually was a joke. Or Sakura and his almost granny were just being overprotective. He could free himself with Sage Mode or using the Kyuubi's chakra, but what ninja needed Senjutsu or the power of a bijou to free himself from a bed? Speaking of the Kyuubi. Hey, Kurama. What happened? Why are we here? Last thing I remember is playing sake shoji with Shikamaru, called Naruto mentally, and losing like there was no tomorrow. He waited for a reply from the ancient fox for a while, puzzled at the silence. Kurama, he called again. He vaguely remembered something about the fuzzball being silent, but, Naruto. Shut up. Let me sleep, the greatest among the bijou finally responded. Oh, hell no. Wake up, you overgrown ball of fur. I woke up in an empty room and I don't remember how I got here. What happened? The only explanation he received was a loud, inhuman snoring. Great. I'm alone, trapped in a room, tied to a bed, and the stupid fuzzball decides to sleep, thought Naruto, pouting. Could it get any worse? After a few minutes of boredom, Naruto realized that he had to go to the bathroom. And from what he could tell, whoever had strapped him to the bed hadn't put a catheter on him. Crap. Minato had an A rank, maybe even S rank, headache. And to think the day had started out so well. He had just dismissed the emergency council meeting, which had lasted 6 hours. Hours that Minato had passed mostly trying to calm down councilmen that were continuously jumping at each other's throats. They launched accusations about which branch among Konoha's military was responsible for allowing this ill-planned infiltration inside the village walls. After all, Konoha was supposed to be safe. To calm them down and finally start to move on with the meeting, Minato had to release enough killer intent that the poor Chunin secretary who was attending had fainted. They'd had to call in a substitute. And a substitute for the substitute. After that, the meeting had started to resemble a discussion between civilized adults about the issue at hand. The first thing asked for had been a damage report, but, surprisingly, the village had been almost entirely unharmed. Sure, there had been some property damage, especially around the building as well as to the actual construction itself. But there had been no major casualties among either the intruders or the forces of Konoha. Just various injuries among the ANBU and the Uchiha. Half of the military police force had been more or less forced on leave, either because of injuries or hopefully temporary trauma. Fugaku and the other senior officers included. That had left the young Masahiro in charge as the highest-ranking member still standing. He hadn't been really enthusiastic about the job, and had shoved most of the responsibilities off onto his poor sister. The enemies had been either captured or had surrendered, which didn't make any sense. According to the reports, and his own fight with the other blonde, they were quite powerful shinobi. Definitely A rank in the least, and unbelievably, there were 4 S-rank shinobi among them. Nobody became an S-rank shinobi without appearing into the bingo book, nobody. But these kids had. They should have been able to resist, or kill, the majority of the forces that had attacked them. Why had they infiltrated or attacked Konoha? All of them were in their teens, unarmed and mostly in various states of undress, complaining of some sort of condition, nausea and hangover. According to the medical personnel, and all the empty sake bottles they'd found and practically everything else that one wouldn't expect from any enemy trying to invade their village, especially one of the great 5 villages. However, the greatest mystery, despite all of these irregularities, was that at least 2 of the captives possessed bloodline limits that were believed to exist only within Konoha. The Sharingan and the Byakugan. The counselors had been speechless for a while, when Masahiro and the ANBU commander had told them that. Only to start screaming again, as the first medical report had confirmed it wasn't a case of transplant, like Kakashi. And when Minato had been able to calm them down again, Shikaku had told about the abilities of the trio he and his squad had captured. The room had fallen into chaos. Accusations of stolen clan secrets, paranoia about a possible infiltration among Konoha's ranks or an imminent attack from IWA or Kumo, and demands to send the prisoners into the worst TI cells had been thrown around. Once again Minato had to re-establish order among the more vocal councilmen. Those prisoners were under special surveillance by members of said clans, but the Yondaime would have preferred it if clan politics hadn't entered this already complicated affair. Not that he could have told the council that. He was frustrated, not stupid. All the prisoners had been placed in isolation, inside the more secure cells Konoha could offer, so there was no reason to panic. And the security had been tightened on his orders, thanks to the potential risk to Konoha's safety. That had seemed to calm down the councilmen, as long an investigation about a possible mole inside the village was conducted. Once that matter had been settled for the moment, Minato had brought up the topic of the seal found by one of the ANBU teams sent to scout the building. Its purpose, unknown. But it was powerful, that was sure. And unstable. Minato had tasked Jiraiya and Kushina to examine it, being among the best seal masters the village could offer. He and Hiruzen would have helped, but Minato had been stuck with the council. And the Sandaime had asked to start his own investigation for a possible root involvement. That had been one of the things he hadn't told to the council, in mutual accord with the ones aware of the intelligence recorded by the ANBU teams. The same was about the possible involvement of Tsunade Senju. That was just a big can of worms he wished he didn't have to deal with. Minato wouldn't have ever doubted the self-exiled Sannin. Even forgiven all her bad history with the village, she would never betray it, he was sure of it. But that didn't explain why some of the prisoners had mentioned her name. Or how an unknown Kunoichi who, for now, had received the codename Pinky from Kushina's report had demonstrated abilities identical to that of the only female Sannin. The only explanation was that Tsunade had taught her, and even then Pinky would have had great chakra control and a talent for medical jutsu to have learned it. No wonder she was in one of the most secured cells, with the seals Kushina had planted on her still in place. If Tsunade had really betrayed Konoha, Minato didn't want to imagine what kind of damage could be done to Konoha if one of the Sannin had gone rogue. Tsunade had to be found and taken back to the village for questioning. Willingly or not. He just hated thinking about who, of all people, he would have to send to catch her. His thoughts were interrupted by an ANBU that appeared in his office, and gave him a quick report. Blondie woke up, was the simple message received. Blondie. The codename Masahiro had come up with for the infiltrator that Minato had fought, who right now in the deepest cell of the highest security facility in the whole village. Oh good. A distraction, thought the yondaime. He really needed one right at that moment, and interrogating the guy that had stolen and inexplicably improved his technique would be quite a welcome distraction indeed. The walk to the facility that held the prisoners was quite uneventful. Immediately after their capture the invaders had been placed in separated cells, buried deep under the surface and secluded from each other. As Minato strolled its hallways, he ignored the other levels and immediately went for the deeper one, where the S-rank prisoners were being held. He had qualified personnel to interrogate the inmates, just a simple questioning for now, even though he knew that Inoichi had asked permission to prepare a Yamanaka special, but he wanted to speak with the younger blonde personally. As he finally passed the last security check, he noticed something unusual. One of the doors on the last floor was covered with seal tags of various kinds. Said door was guarded by quite a lot of ANBU who looked tense, like they were expecting an attack instead of just guarding a prisoner. They finally noticed Minato, giving him the usual greeting reserved for the village leader, without losing any of their wariness of the sealed metal door. Sandman's cell, Hokage-sama. We had to secure the door with seal tags, one of the team leaders said, answering the Hokage's unasked question. Sandman? Oh right, the redhead that captured my hand in his sand technique, thought Minato massaging his temples reflexively. He really shouldn't have let Masahiro choose the intruders' codenames until their identities could be verified. Why did you have to seal the door? He asked, already knowing that he would not like the answer. They won't stick to him, the tags just slide off, the ANBU said, gesturing to the seal's tags. Slide off? What do you mean, slide off? His sand, sir. The tags can't adhere to it, the grains just shift and the seal tag falls off, the ANBU responded apologetically. Are you saying that one of the S-rank shinobi that attacked the village is not restrained? Asked Minato, eyes widening. We couldn't restrain him, sir. That's why we sealed the door. Minato's headache came back in full force. This was not good at all. Open the door. I'll do it, he commanded. Hokage-sama. You must not risk, the ANBU started, before being interrupted by the yondaime's cold glare. As Minato got closer to the metal door, the ANBU started to peel off the seals. With the last seal tag removed, he entered the antechamber of the high security cell. It was a small room, little more than a broom closet, with two doors. The one that Minato had just opened, and another one that led to the actual cell. A specially designed mechanism rendered it impossible to open one of the metal barriers if the other one was opened. He heard the door behind him closing. When Minato opened the cell, he was greeted by the sight of the red-haired teen standing right in front of the door, his arms crossed. Behind the redhead, the whole room was filled with sand. Yondaime Hokage-sama greeted the teen, seemingly not impressed by being in the presence of one of the leaders of one of the strongest hidden villages. My ANBU report that they're having difficulties placing restraining seals on you, Minato stated succinctly. I dislike seals, the prisoner replied simply. No expression was readable on his face. Well, you're a prisoner of Konoha now. Let those seals be placed, or I will find something stronger to keep you here, the yondaime said with a steely tone in his voice. The two shinobi stared into each other's eyes for almost a minute, engaged in a battle of wills. Very well, the red-haired captive finally replied. Minato hadn't been expecting him to give up so easily, but didn't show it. He quickly placed the seal tags and, when he was sure that they were set in place, left the room to attend to what he'd originally come down here for. Put those seals on the door again, just to be sure, he ordered the ANBU as he resumed his walk towards Blondie's prison. He never saw the specks of sand that had entered into his pockets. Gaara could hear the ANBU on the other side of the metal doors replacing the seals used to keep him inside. Not that they would have been enough if he'd wanted out, but for now it was better if he played the part of the good prisoner. When he was sure the Yondaime Hokage was far enough away, he let Shikaku's chakra run along the sand covering his body. The surge of Bijou chakra overloaded the seals, making them fall off. He had agreed to let the seals be placed on him. He hadn't specified for how long. Raising a fist to his face, he started spying on the Yondame's surroundings, forming the third eye with the sand he had planted on him. Minato finally reached the final ward of the lowest level in the holding complex. The place where the most dangerous shinobi and criminals were put until they needed to be interrogated in a more specialized room. And where they were executed. He nodded to the ANBU posted outside of the door. One of them knocked on the metal surface. A spy hole opened for a good second before shutting quickly. The door finally moved, welcoming the Hokage into a room filled with security monitors. As the operators saluted him, he started to study the figure visible on the screens. How long has he been struggling like that? He asked without looking at the guards. Since he woke up, Hokage-sama. Any unusual behavior? Well, started the guard, hesitating, he screamed towards the camera. That's actually normal for a prisoner, interrupted Minato. Yes, Hokage-sama. But, well, he seemed convinced that it was some kind of prank from this bachan of his. Minato would have been surprised, normally, but he had already received quite a few surprises in the last several hours and he was pretty sure nothing else could surprise him ever again. Meh. Kid's probably putting an act. No way he can really believe this is a prank, he thought. I'm ready to go in. Open the door, ordered the Yondame. The guards immediately started the procedure to open the pressurized door that could only be controlled from this station. Seals in the passage, disabled, the first guard said after a flurry of hand seals. Traps, disabled, his colleague added, pushing a series of buttons on a console. There was an hiss and the entrance slowly opened, revealing a long perfectly lit corridor behind it. Here, Hokage-sama, the older warden said, passing him an earpiece will close the door behind you. Once you're inside the cell, the traps and the seals will be reactivated. Minato nodded, putting the earpiece on. As he entered the hallway, the 6-inch thick door started closing behind him. He knew that, should the defenses have been active, he would have immediately found himself unable to mold chakra, injured or killed by various traps and backslash or poisoned by a chemical agent that would have dispersed itself 10 minutes after his demise. Sadly, this was the only cell of its kind in Konoha, created during the last years of the Sandame's reign. Had it been otherwise, he would have put the other prisoners into similar ones. They hadn't been able to build more during the Third War, for budget reasons. Minato had proposed to add more, but the motion had been voted down by the council since it hadn't been not a priority, and those resources were instead used to expand the Ninja Academy program to help replenish their numbers. He hoped they saw the irony of it now that they had 4 S-rank shinobi as prisoners after just a few months into his Hokageship. Karma was a real bitch. As he finally arrived at the end of the hallway, he signaled the guards to open the door. Alright, Namikaze. You're the Yondame Hokage. Put your scary face on. You have to interrogate a prisoner. Nothing different from the usual, he thought as the pressurized entrance emitted a hissing sound. He waited for the door to open itself completely before entering the room. Minato knew the noise had attracted the prisoner's attention. The Yondame deliberately waited at the cell's entrance, while the specially arranged lighting gave a more theatrical effect to his appearance. It was a simple psychological effect designed to increase the cell occupant's anxiety. Judging by the prisoner's expression, and the fact that he had stopped struggling, it was working. With every single slow step Minato made, the prisoner's eyes widened a little more in recognition. And incredulity, if the Yondame interpreted his facial expression right. Minato stopped a few feet from the side of the bed, never breaking eye contact with the captive. Then the mysterious S-ranked shinobi teen that was strapped to the bed emitted a girlish scream. The echo of a high-pitched scream could be heard throughout the whole facility. When it reached Orochimaru, he stopped for a moment before brushing it off. Screams and other similar noises were not uncommon in the underground complex, so why bother? It wasn't like he actually cared for the prisoners. Well, that wasn't true. He cared about one prisoner, the boy with the strange chakra construct jutsu, who apparently also possessed the Sharingan. As he approached the ward guarded by the Uchiha clansmen, he passed through them without even giving them a passing glance. They just let him by. It was good being a Sannin, and probably the most feared of the three. It had its perks. It was probably one of the last things he still had, after the Namikaze brat stole the title of Hokage from him. Finally entering the antechamber he was looking for, he stopped once more, but this time it was for an unusual and unexpected reason. In addition to the guards placed to secure the prisoner's cell, there were also 3 Uchiha shinobi, all sprawled on the floor, unconscious. A medic nin was tending to them, so concentrated on his work that he didn't sense Orochimaru's presence. Orochimaru-sama greeted one of the guards with a small, polite bow. What happened here? Is the prisoner secured? The snake Sannin asked. The captive used some kind of genjutsu, by the means of his. The Uchiha paused, gritting his teeth, by means of his eyes. Orochimaru-sama. You mean his Sharingan, correct? Asked Orochimaru, smirking. Every Uchiha in the room tensed at that. With the exception of the 3 passed out ones, of course. Touchy subject, he thought, amused. Yes, exactly, Orochimaru-sama, the guard continued stoically. These 3 were tasked to interrogate the eye stealer. They each tried, but the result was the same. So far, they have yet to regain consciousness. I see, whispered the pale shinobi. What measures have been taken? Checking the surveillance feeds, we understand that whatever genjutsu he was using requires simple eye contact. So we blindfolded him. Only eye contact. Why, I have never heard of such a thing, Orochimaru said, arching an eyebrow. Has any progress been made with the interrogation? No, sir, admitted the Uchiha. Whenever questioned about his origins, he immediately uses his technique. Is that so? Then I suppose I should attempt to interrogate him myself. Don't you agree? He said with a sly smile that didn't reach his eyes. But, Orochimaru-sama. The prisoner has the bloodline of the Uchiha clan. Surely this could be classified as clan business. We should ask. The prisoner is an enemy of Konoha, who attacked Konoha shinobi. Orochimaru interrupted without changing his tone even a bit. Which means that he's Konoha's business, not just Uchiha business, even if he has your bloodline. Am I wrong? No. You're not wrong, Orochimaru-sama, the guard admitted with a frown, but this is not exactly standard procedure. Have you asked permission from Hokage-sama for interrogating the prisoner? I had hoped to spare him this triviality in the midst of this very eventful day. I am sure that I, Orochimaru of the Sannin, can be trusted to interrogate one of the infiltrators. Or must I really bother Yondaime-sama to obtain permission? The guard hesitated one more moment, before shrugging it off. Orochimaru knew that he had a point, after all. And being a Sannin really had its perks. Finally, he was led inside the prisoner's cell. The prisoner, tied to a metal chair, looked exactly how Orochimaru remembered him from when he and his allies had surrendered suddenly, resigning himself to his fate after having saved Fugaku's life. For some reason he couldn't really discern. A shinobi of such a caliber should have put up more of a fight. Surrender meant death, even more so if caught during an invasion against another village. But in this boy, powerful as he was, there was little logic, if his reaction after stabbing Fugaku was an indication. Or how he saved the Uchiha clan head's life, minutes after almost ending it. That was a very illogical thing to do. Madness, maybe? His behavior so far has been disturbing enough to indicate something like that, though the pale shinobi as he silently sat in front of the prisoner. The teen raised his head, and he could see the improvised blindfold the guards had placed on his eyes, hardly more than a strip of bandages tied around his head. Orochimaru, the prisoner whispered in a stony voice. Orochimaru narrowed his eyes slightly. Had this boy really recognized him so easily, even if they had met only briefly during his capture? He really is an S-rank shinobi, even if he is so young, such potential. I see that I am at disadvantage here. You know who I am, but I don't know anything about you. What is your name? He asked, sounding genuinely curious. Sasuke, the strapped captive responded after a while, his face donning a slight frown. He seemed very careful, guarded even. Very well, Sasuke-kun, continued Orochimaru, without changing his tone. Let's have a chat, you and I. Where are you from? The prisoner seemed to flinch at the honorific, but responded without hesitation. Somewhere very far away. Is that so? And tell me, please, does this faraway place have a name, perhaps? At this, the young Sasuke remained silent. Not that Orochimaru was expecting him to actually respond to that question, but he'd had to try. I want to speak with the Hokage, Sasuke demanded. Orochimaru's jaw tightened slightly. I'm afraid Hokage-sama is busy right now. That's the reason I'm here, you see, he responded, managing to keep his voice calm. He was a professional, after all. You can say to me what you have to say to the yondaime. The young duck-butt-haired boy frown deepened. No response came after that. Very well, let's change topic, Orochimaru conceded. After all, you will be able to answer that question later, during a more strict interrogation from our specialists, he added, with a sly grin. If this Sasuke understood the reference to the torture interrogation department, he didn't show it. The Sannin waited an entire minute to let that sink into the infiltrator's head before he asked the next question. Why did you attack Konoha? He asked. What was your objective? We didn't attack Konoha, the prisoner answered immediately. It was almost a whisper. Oh. Forgive me then for misunderstanding, but from the way you were, we didn't attack Konoha. Sasuke snapped, oozing killing intent. Orochimaru was not impressed. It was an accident, he whispered once again. You honestly think you'll fool anyone with that? Who do you take us for? Replied the Sannin in a low, dangerous tone. There is no way you could transport an entire building into the village by accident. Yours has probably been the most successful, and at the same time, least efficient invasion Konoha has ever faced. It was an accident, the captive repeated once again, like a mantra. An accident? Like when you stabbed Fugaku Uchiha? Or when you devastated the military police force with your chakra construct that was impervious to all forms of attack used on it? Speaking of which, wouldn't you like to know? Sasuke snorted. It was Orochimaru's turn to remain silent. His frown deepened. The boy was not taking him seriously. Time to push a little harder. You could tell me about it, or I could wait to read the reports from your interrogator. Or of one of the Yamanaka clan, I'm sure you've heard of them, he mused for a second. One of their more advanced procedures is to wipe the subject's personality completely clean, you see. In the end, the prisoner is little more than a puppet willing to spill all his secrets, if asked. It's rarely used, most of the time a simple mind-walking session is sufficient. But sometimes, it's not. He left the threat hanging out in the air for a whole minute, before speaking again. I'm not sure if the result is permanent. Or reversible. Normally, at this point, even seasoned veterans would have at least shown some sign of uneasiness. A twitch, a layer of sweat on the forehead, screams and threats, begging for mercy. Something. The idea of being violated in such a way, inside their very mind, should have been terrifying for almost anybody. The only thing this Sasuke did was take a deep breath, as if trying to calm himself. Let's change the subject, shall we? Tell me about your companions. What about them? The teen asked, in a too forced neutral tone. He is wary again, Orochimaru thought, smiling inwardly. Good. You could tell me something about them. For example, who is the leader of your little group? The one that organized the invasion. Our leader was not among us, but the one responsible. I would bet it's Naruto's fault, Sasuke said with a faint smile. He would bet. How badly organized are these people? Orochimaru thought in confusion. Naruto? He asked, putting a good show of being intrigued by that name. Why was it so familiar? He could swear he had heard it before. The blonde idiot, his captive clarified. Oh, the sage. The one who fought the yondaime, Orochimaru replied as a matter of fact. So his name is Naruto, MMH. He fought the yondaime. Sasuke whispered. Indeed. He was difficult to capture, from what I've heard. Care to tell me why you would bet that your invasion is his fault? How did they capture him? Sasuke demanded instead. What? Orochimaru asked, narrowing his eyes. Was the boy daring to try to get information from him? Tell me how they captured him, and I will answer your last question, Sasuke said patiently. Orochimaru didn't say anything for a while, but he realized this teen cared about this Naruto. He could use that. What could Sasuke gain from knowing the circumstances of the blonde's arrest? He fainted when Jiraiya, my teammate, arrived on the scene, he revealed. He was a little ashamed to have had to tell such a thing. At this, Sasuke snorted in what seemed to be genuine amusement. Your answer, the Sannin prompted. It's Naruto. I would be more surprised if something strange didn't happen around him. Still, this is the strangest by far, Sasuke smirked. Orochimaru decided then and there to not exclude the possibility that the boy had some sort of mental condition, but he had his proof of some kind of bond with the captive blonde. Time to use his hard-gained leverage. You know, Orochimaru continued, maybe I could have this Naruto go through that Yamanaka practice I told you before. Gritted teeth. Clenched fists. Small tremors. Finally, a reaction from this stoic raven-haired boy. Time to push further. As Orochimaru pondered how to do that, he recalled something about Sasuke's capture after his surrender. Perfect. What about that red-haired girl? Maybe she could go through. Don't you dare touch them. Sasuke snapped all of a sudden, struggling against his shackles, trying to launch himself at the Sannin. Orochimaru grinned wickedly. Oh, I will, unless you tell me more about that jutsu of. He stopped, seeing how Sasuke was wrestling with his restraints, jerking his head violently. What are you doing, you fool? Orochimaru wasn't able to finish his question. The bandages tied around Sasuke's head, loosened by his violent movements, fell enough to expose the boy's eyes. He tried to divert his gaze, having learned what happened to the other interrogators, but it was too late. He met two whirling pools of black and red. Naruto kept screaming until his lungs begged for air. Then he stopped, took a deep breath, and started to scream again. Please stop doing that, the man who looked exactly like his father muttered. He stopped, but in shock, not because he was asked to. The voice was identical. Just like in his probably alcohol-induced dream. Was he still dreaming? Naruto tried to pinch himself, but he couldn't move his hands, so he opted for scratching his palm with his nails. He could feel them on his skin. It was real. You're real. He whispered, not really talking to the man. At the strange question, the man raised a quizzical eyebrow, slightly confused. Yes, I am. Now, I have some questions for her. Oh crap. I almost killed you. Naruto yelled, unable to control himself. Yes, you did. I was there, the carbon copy of the Yondaime replied, staring at him with a puzzled expression. Oh crap. You almost killed me. The younger blonde yelped. He couldn't believe it. It didn't make any sense. Well, since you did attack me with deadly force first, but how? You're supposed to be dead. The teen blurted out before narrowing his eyes suspiciously. Wait a minute, how do I know that you're actually Minato Namikaze? Maybe you're lying. I bet you're using an henge or something. It was the older man's turn to narrow his eyes. Naruto felt a shiver go down his spine. I don't know what your plans are, but I don't have to prove my identity to you, imposter. Imposter? You're the imposter. You, fake. Naruto sputtered, unable to believe what he was hearing. How dare this jutsu stealer? I'm not the imposter strapped to a bed here, you are, the fake Minato said in annoyance. No, you are. Naruto muttered in a childish tone. That doesn't make any sense, the Yondaime imposter said with the same voice that one would use to reprimand a child. You are. You are. Naruto insisted. Who cared if it didn't make any sense? He was right. I'm not. R2. I'm not. R2, enough. The man claiming to be his deceased father roared in frustration. The atmosphere in the room chilled immediately as the fake, older blonde emitted a huge wave of killing intent. Naruto somehow managed to maintain control of his close-to-bursting bladder. He had faced far worse in the past, but those had been different. Zabuza, Gaara, Orochimaru, Nagato, Obito, Madara, none of them had stared at him like that using his father's eyes. Like he was scum. I'll never forgive you for this, the Jinchuriki thought. He watched silently as the scowling blonde slowly walked around the bed, forcing him to strain his neck to follow his movements and reminding him of his constrictions. Right now, you're in the most secured cell of the highest security facility in all of Konoha, said the older man in a steel voice. All of your comrades have been captured, but as I'm sure you can understand, we have many questions for you. Who are you? Why did you attack Konoha? Why did you infiltrate the village in such a flamboyant way? You are powerful, but you were ill-prepared to face the whole village. You could have caused much more damage, but mysteriously seemed to be disorganized and disoriented to the point of near uselessness. Which makes no sense. So, what was the purpose of this attack? Naruto heard all the questions, but his mind had to reboot a couple of times before he could start to process the nonsense he had just heard. He was in Konoha. Alright, he could suppose that was true. He was in Konoha and someone who looked like his father was interrogating him, telling him that he and his friends had attacked the village. Are they okay? He whispered. At his question, his interrogator arched an eyebrow. My friends, he specified, are they okay? They're all in custody, the man replied evenly after a bit. That didn't help Naruto relax one bit. In custody didn't mean unharmed. So, he was in Konoha, being accused of attacking the village, by a man who had his father's face for some reason. What else? What about Tsunade-chan? What did you do to her? Tsunade? What's your relationship with Tsunade? His interrogator asked. Naruto decided to remain silent. He wasn't sure why the guy insisted on the disguise, but he was sure that he was not a Konoha shinobi. Everyone knew about how he was supposed to be Tsunade's all-but-official heir. Actually, all of the elemental nations should know about that, well, the ninja, at least. Where was this guy hiding during the war? Under a rock. After a while, the Minato look-alike spoke again, leaning forward, his eyes like cold blue fire. You better answer me, boy, or I swear I will authorize the use of a Yamanaka special on you. Hokage's promise. Tsunade is supposed to be Hokage. Not you, imposter. Naruto exploded, losing his temper. The man froze, his eyes widening a little. He leaned back, away from the bed. I see, so that's the reason, he murmured, lost in his thoughts. What's the deal you have with her? Did she train you too? After seeing what your pink-haired friend is capable of, it's clear she was taught by Tsunade. What about the rest of you? Wait, you mean Sakura-chan? Of course Tsunade taught her. She's her student. Naruto blurted out, before biting his tongue. Sakura's status as the Godame Hokage's student was another well-known fact, but he didn't like the idea of giving information to a potential enemy. Damn my loose tongue, he thought. No more talking. This guy isn't going to get anything from me. Seeing him remain stubbornly silent, the older blonde moved on, apparently with more questions. What about the Uchiha? Well, I'm sure Fugaku wouldn't call him such, but he's clearly a descendant of the clan. What can you tell me about him? I doubt Tsunade taught him his jutsu, not really her style. Did she have help from other shinobi to train you? Naruto remained silent, his resolve wavering in the face of the man's accusations against his bachan, but the man kept going. And what about the Hyuga girl? Where did she learn the gentle fist? That's not supposed to be taught to anyone outside the Hyuga clan who are loyal to Konoha. I know that for sure. I have my ways. Her appearance has caused quite a stir among the elders. He had to bite his tongue to strengthen his resolve to not give the man the satisfaction of answering. There are also your companions who have shown peculiar abilities. Like the sand user that rescued you. Or the bloodthirsty brute who mauled everyone he could get his hands on. Or the guy made of water. I suspect that finding such talented individuals would require time and resources. Do you have anything to say for yourselves? Naruto raised his left brow at the man's ridiculous notions. Tsunade-chan recruiting Gaara, Jugo, and Suigetsu. This guy is crazy. If he hadn't decided just a little earlier to not respond to the questions this man had, he would have exploded in a loud laugh just from the absurdity of such a thing. Then there are all the others. Quite skilled, yet so young. How did Tsunade manage to obtain the services of so many A-ranked shinobi under 20? There's also how she was able to teach them secret clan jutsu. Speaking of jutsu, the older blonde said, lowering the volume of his voice and adding a deadly edge to it. How did you learn the Rasengan? Only Jiraiya and I are currently capable of using it. Jiraiya? The kabuki dance wasn't part of a dream? Naruto whispered, forgetting his self-imposed silence. I'm afraid not. My sensei is quite eccentric, replied the man, sounding almost apologetic. Naruto gaped at the older blonde, speechless. Interpreting his lack of answers as another sign of stubbornness, said older blonde spoke again in a hissing tone. Enough with your silence. Your plan has failed, give me the answers we need, or your friends will suffer the consequences. But Naruto wasn't listening the man's threats anymore. He was lost as his mind. Impossible, he whispered. You're lying. No, I'm not. I don't need to lie to you, boy. What happened? What happened? You were captured, that's what happened. Let's not start going in circles. Now, answer my questions. Naruto was struggling under his restraints. He needed air. Fresh air. What happened, Kurama? He murmured in his panicked state, not realizing he was actually talking aloud. Answer me, damn it. His interrogator blinked in confusion. Who's Kurama? Your sensei. Is he the one who taught you the Rasengan? I'm not talking to you. Naruto snapped. To hell with the pleasantries, he needed to get out of here. Closing his eyes, he started to concentrate on the natural energy around him, only to feel his body convulse like he was having a seizure. The scraps of energy he had started to absorb dispersed throughout the room. What the hell? You revealed you were a sage during our fight, remember? We took precautions. Special seals made by Jiraiya, the Toad Sage, his interrogator replied calmly. Anytime you try to mold natural energy, the seals activate, forcing your muscles to contract randomly. That way you can't concentrate enough to enter sage mode. Naruto stared at his father's look-alike. That was actually a pretty clever move. And only a sage would know about the details of how the natural energy worked. Which reinforced the claim of Jiraiya being Kurama. Answer me or I swear I'll shave off all your fur, he screamed mentally. The universe didn't make sense anymore, so who cared about not ticking Kurachan off? Finally, from the deepest part of the seal, he felt an answer. Tired, so tired. What do you want, kid? Finally. Kurama, what happened? Who is this guy? And why are you sleeping so much? The mighty fox grumbled, closing his eyes again. Naruto waited patiently for an answer. Then he heard a snore. Oh no you don't. Wake up. Answer me. What's wrong with you? Chakra exhaustion, need to rest. Naruto observed the big, orange bijou inside his mindscape for a few moments before speaking again. He didn't want his furry friend to fall asleep again right when he needed answers. Kurama, how can you have chakra exhaustion? You're made of the stuff. Wait, how did you use all that chakra? You used it. Idiot, was the only response the tired fox gave him. What do you mean, I used it? I don't remember such a thing. You were drunk, Kurama said, yawning. Drunk enough to affect, even me. What are you talking about? Naruto started, only to stop. He remembered, vaguely, that something happened at the party. Well, sure, something happened. Like the doppelganger of his father destroying his brand new apartment. Even if he had to admit he'd caused a lot of damage too. But did something else happen? Maybe. He wasn't sure. Too much sake, and too little sleep. Even in his drowsy state, Kurama noticed his puzzled expression. Don't you remember? When everybody was asleep. Sleep, come on, try to recall what happened so I can sleep. Something about something. After the party, books. Oh yeah. The Ika books Jiraiya left me. Along with, Naruto's eyes widened, both in his mindscape that his true ones. Kurama, please just tell me what the fuck happened, and who this guy in front of me is. Naruto said to the fox, almost in a pleading tone. We are in the past, moron. It's your fault. That guy in front of you, is your father. Now shut up and let me sleep so I can restore my strength. With those last loud words, Naruto found himself kicked out of his own mindscape, something that hadn't happened to him since he was 12. He found himself still tied to his bed, his interrogator staring at him impatiently since, in his eyes, he had probably zoned out. He was in the past, in front of his father. He was in Konoha, in the past, with his friends. And his father and the village believed that they had attacked the leaf. And they had given them enough proof to cement that belief. Naruto started cursing and screaming inwardly, using all the profanities he knew, managing miraculously to maintain a perfect poker face. This was even worse than he feared. I'm awaiting your answers. Minato Namikaze prompted in the most unfatherly tone he could muster. At least in Naruto's opinion. Oh, shit. What do I do? Naruto knew that he had two options. 1. Tell all the truth, risk being taken for a liar, a madman, a fool that was insulting the Hokage's intelligence. Or a crazy madman that was lying to insult the Hokage's intelligence just to fool around. Only an idiot would choose this option. 2. Creating a contrived lie made of deceit, cunning plans, and contingencies that would probably be discovered sooner or later. It would require the skills of a master manipulator. Sadly, when the academy had covered manipulating others for your own advantage, he had skipped class. Hey, I know it'll probably sound crazy, but, he started, laughing nervously and looking Minato straight in the eyes. Would you believe me if I said that I'm your son from the future? A long, very long pause followed that question. No. No, I wouldn't, his father said slowly, sighing. I see you're not taking this seriously. Without another word, the Yondaime Hokage turned his back to Naruto and walked towards the door, muttering something into his earpiece. The door opened. Where are you going, Dad? Asked Naruto, confused. I'm going back to my office to authorize the use of a Yamanaka special on you, should you keep acting like a fool during your next interrogation. Minato answered in a matter-of-fact tone of voice. Think about it, son. Hey. Wait. I need to go to the bath, Naruto yelled as the door closed. Room. Naruto stared at the metal door for a while, listening to the mechanism inside it sealing him off from the outside world. Then he started banging his head on the bed in frustration. I could have handled this mess way better than that, he thought once he'd stopped, staring at the ceiling and trying to ignore his suffering bladder. After a few minutes, a question popped into his head. What's a Yamanaka special? He asked to nobody in particular. Of course, no answer came. Chapter 9. Masahiro was in Fugaku's office. That wasn't really unusual. What was different this time, was the perspective. He was sitting at the desk, idly shuffling some documents and reports. All the higher-ups of the military police had been hospitalized for one reason or another, so he'd been more or less forced to take the job. So far it hadn't been a great experience. Not even 5 minutes after he'd started his temporary assignment and he had already been assaulted by an anxious Mikoto Uchiha, who was worried about her husband's absence since the emergency that morning. Apparently, nobody had thought to tell the young Uchiha matriarch what had happened. Or that her husband was still alive. So it was Masahiro who told her that. With blunt honesty. Once Masahiro was able to calm her down, he told her that her husband had been stabbed by an Uchiha of unknown origins. When he was able to calm her down once again, he explained what had happened. Various questions interrupted him. Mostly they were along the lines of, who is this unknown Uchiha? Are you sure he's an Uchiha? And are you really sure he's an Uchiha? After he explained that, yes, he was sure that the intruder that had almost killed Fugaku, kidnapped him, and saved his life, a remarkable accomplishment for an invader that had traumatized or rendered unfit for duty 2/3 of the military police force single-handedly, and that he was sure that the eventual blood tests would confirm that. She practically raced out of the room to go to the hospital, with the very young Uchiha heir in her arms. He was finally able to try and organize the police force to the best of his abilities. Since so many of them were hospitalized, the number of shinobi that he would be able to assign to the investigation was going to be stretched thin. Thank the log, Konoha's forces were still working through joint operation. That meant that he could ask for auxiliary personnel from the other forces. Of course, that meant he had to put an Uchiha officer on the scene, to manage the other shinobi, as per regulations. Pervy Shrimp, you're in command of the investigation of the building used by the prisoners to attack Konoha, he said into the radio, his tone perfectly serious. Masahiro and I. Don't call me that. The indignant voice of his minion replied. That's Masahiro-sama to you now, Pervy Shrimp. Hey, you're just a temporary substitute. True, but that doesn't mean I can't enjoy this, he stated simply. Wait, what do you mean, investigation of the building? The only interesting thing in there is that big seal, and Jiraiya-sama and Uzumaki-san are already doing that. It's also necessary to collect the evidence left by the intruders, along with all of the objects on the scene. All of them. All of them? His minion asked after a long pause. There was a tinge of panic in her voice. It is crime scene procedure, is it not? But some of the rooms are literally covered in empty bottles. That's the procedure. And please, put each item in a separate bag, as the crime lab likes it. He turned off the radio before listening to her reply. He knew he wouldn't like it anyway. Stretching, he put his feet on Fugaku's desk and took a gulp from his steaming coffee mug. It was good to be the boss. The enormous seal was still in the center of the room, continuing its circulatory movement with an almost lazy leisure. Jiraiya, the toad sage, was sitting at a small table covered by scrolls, sketches, and notes about the unstable seal. There were also more than a few empty coffee mugs. His hair was messier than usual, and the dark bags under his eyes were proof of his stressful day. His full attention was dedicated to the sheet of paper in front of him, where he was trying to complete a sketch of the various symbols present on the seal. Normally it wouldn't have been a problem for a seal master, especially for the one that had taught the basics to the Yondaime Hokage. But the seal was extremely complex, full of symbols and matrices he didn't fully comprehend. And it was moving. That didn't help at all. He was almost done. Maybe he could finally start working on the thing if he was able to study the seal as a whole and decode the individual parts that formed it. Of course, the seal shifted form completely as he was re-inking his brush. Jiraiya almost snapped a brush for the second time in a day. He decided to vent his anger towards the innocent paper instead. He grabbed it, crushing it between his big hands, before finally tossing it over his shoulder, where it joined a small pile of its fallen brethren. The Toad Summoner felt like he was fighting a losing battle. He glanced towards Kushina, who was sitting on the floor right in front of the seal. For the whole afternoon, she had just observed it. No notes, no scrolls, no nothing. She had attempted to, but after a few hours or so of worthless work she just decided to look it with a mean eye, frowning deep in thought, and consuming lots of cups of coffee and snacks. Jiraiya was sure that behind her concentrated expression, there was an incoming sugar and backslash or caffeine rush. She probably felt his gaze on her, as she turned her head to stare at him. Her bags were almost as bad as his own. So? She asked. There was a challenging tone in her voice, and he passed his hand through his white mane, thinking of how to answer the simple question. I've got nothing, he had to admit after a while. I have no idea what this thing is supposed to do. Really? You're going to give up, just like that? The redhead asked, taken aback. I'm not. But, it's so unstable that it's impossible to make head or tails of it, he tried to justify himself. Kushina raised a red brow at him with a smirk, apparently enjoying his frustration. If he had to be completely honest with himself, Jiraiya had not been completely focused on the task at hand. His mind had somehow drifted to the mysterious prisoner that had fought with Minato. According to Minato, the youngster was able to use the Rasengan. That could be explained. It was one of the Yondaime's signature techniques and it was based on chakra manipulation. So a rival village could have just gained enough intelligence and figured out something similar, a whirling sphere of chakra that tore everything it come in contact with. Such a task would have required a well-versed genius in all aspects of chakra manipulation. Shinobi of that caliber, even if rare, were present in most of the hidden villages. Completing it, on the other hand, was another matter altogether. Still possible, highly improbable, and that kid, or his master, had done it. The Sannin had seen what effects that jutsu had had on the roof of the building. They had been lucky the whole thing exploded high in the sky, after Kushina had disrupted the enemy's throw, otherwise the Yondaime would have been destroyed, and a good chunk of Konoha with him. The sage mode, however. He knew, on an academic level, that other summons granted some of their summoners the possibility to go through the difficult training to become a sage. Few tried, and even fewer managed to complete it. It was probably one of the biggest reasons Jiraiya had never met another sage until that morning. So young, and such power, that brat had incredible potential. Then there was the frog kata which could have only be learned on Mount Myaboku. When his former student had told him that, he'd immediately checked the summoning contract. No names besides his own and Minato's were present on it. All the other people that had signed the scroll had been dead for decades, or even centuries. So how in the Six Paths was that invader able to use a taijutsu style created by the toads? He had summoned a messenger toad and written a letter to Fukasaku-sama, but no answer had arrived yet. He would have gone to talk with the toads in person but his presence was required in the village. You're thinking about Mini Minato, aren't you? Kushina said, interrupting his musings. What? The toad sage asked intelligently. Come on, you know, that intruder that looks a lot like him. The one who fainted when he saw you. Oh, right. Him. You know, you would think that he started, only to stop abruptly. Kushina-chan, are you poking the seal? It helps me think, the woman pouted, using the tip of a brush to nudge the edge of the seal array. I believe I'm onto something, here. After a few more seconds of her prodding the seal with her brush turned to stick, the arrays changed disposition once again, with the complicated motions of lines, symbols and matrices, much to Jiraiya's consternation, who was on the verge of starting his futile attempt to copy it again. I've got it. The younger seal master shouted, jumping to her feet, fist raised into the air. The sudden motion almost startled Jiraiya, even with all the training and experience in his career. Wait, you understood something? He asked after the initial surprise from the redhead's outburst. Don't keep me in the dark, spit it out. It's not one seal array, and it's not unstable. No wait, it is, but, she said, interrupting herself when she saw Jiraiya's puzzled expression. Hear me out, pervert. This mass of chaotic lines that resembles a seal is actually made by multiple seal matrices, put on different levels. Each of them individually are totally unbalanced, some probably even unfinished. And some are really, really unstable. Don't you get how awesome that is? She asked finally, grinning. I don't see why that would be a good thing, Kushina, Jiraiya said flatly, starting to worry about the red-haired woman's sanity. Or at least about her ability to work under partial exhaustion, with her system full of sugar and caffeine. What kind of seal master are you? She questioned with an incredulous tone. The single parts, taken on their own, would be useless. Or dangerously unstable, as in, explode in your face as you drew them unstable. I'm the seal master that taught the Yondaime Hokage, thank you very much, said Jiraiya indignantly, unconsciously taking a single step away from the potentially dangerous ink lines. And still, I'm the one who has to explain this to you, since you can't understand it. Kushina said proudly, pointing a finger at him. Where was I? Dangerously unstable. Jiraiya reminded her. The Sannin made a mental note to tell Minato to hide coffee and sugary products from Kushina for a while. At least a few months would suffice. Yeah, right. That. As I was saying, on their own they are useless or dangerous. But together, they balance each other out. No explosions in your face, and they start to do what you want them to do. The seal shifting form is just a way to have the whole thing keep going without, exploding, she exclaimed, very excited by the whole idea for some reason. Jiraiya blamed the caffeine. Because it would do some serious damage, like half of the village gone, if it exploded. Oh, don't make that face, I doubt it'll happen. This thing isn't designed to be a bomb. Alright, Kushina, alright, Jiraiya said, after calming himself. Let's suppose for a moment your theory is correct. It's not a theory. Kushina pouted, stomping her feet on the ground. She really resembled a kid with a bad case of sugar rush now. Fine, fine. If what are you saying is true, how would the intruders manage to create such a thing without it taking out a good part of their own village? The unstable seals would have remained dangerous for the whole creation process. I thought that too, but then I realized that a team of seal masters. You think the intruders are seal masters? Jiraiya interrupted. They're too young, Kushina. So what, you old toad? It's not like there's an age requirement, and they probably have allies that help them pull this off. They could be the seal masters. Sure, the calligraphy is a little off, but maybe they just don't care. Where was I? Team of seal masters. Jiraiya murmured. Yes, definitely. No more sugar for her. Period. Oh, thank you. A team of seal masters, moving in unison and with perfect coordination, could manage to pull this off with few problems. Especially if they had access to large chakra reserves to actually activate it in time. Before parts of it started to explode, Jiraiya remained silent for a few minutes, pondering about that. How much chakra are we talking about, here? You tell me. The whole thing is still active, she said, pointing with her thumb to the seal array. Are you saying that whoever our enemies are, they managed to draw this overcomplicated monstrosity, activate it with a large portion of chakra, somehow teleport a whole building inside the village walls, and their damn seal is still active? As in, it could do more stuff when we least expect it. Jiraiya remained silent for a few seconds, before realizing something. The enemy had a sage among their ranks. The chakra source used to power up the seal was him. Heck, maybe he was one of the seal masters that traced it. In that precise moment, Jiraiya realized what an idiot he was. More or less, yeah. Not really good news, I know, Kushina mumbled, apologetically. Oh, and it's not exactly a teleportation seal, What? He asked, flatly. The seal parts, it's difficult to read them because they always shift position and they are kinda concealed among the unnecessary lines, but I'm sure that the stuff about space is just a small part of it. So, the Sannin asked finally, what does this seal do, exactly? I have no idea. Kushina replied, with a fearsome grin. No coffee. No sugar. Ever. And Minato probably should keep that stuff away from their kids, should they have any. Well, that doesn't help us at all. Are you sure the seal works as you said? He asked, with a hopeful tone. Things would have been much simpler if the redhead was wrong. Hey, who's the Uzumaki here? She asked, scowling. You've got a point. Damn right I've got a point. Dadaba Kushina stopped suddenly, laying her hands on her stomach and grunting in pain. After struggling a bit, she fell on her knees. Jiraiya was on her side immediately, alarmed by the woman's sudden fit. I'm fine, Kushina reassured. It's just the damn fox. It's been really agitated today. Really? Asked the Sannin. Maybe I should check on your seal. No need. I checked myself. The seal's tight, there's no danger of it escaping. How long has it been like that? The whole day? He asked with a thoughtful frown. No, just since. Yes, I think it's been just since the fight with Mini Minato. Why? Jiraiya reflected on this. He quickly dismissed the idea that the previously unknown sage had had something to do with Kushina's seal. Even if the youngster was a seal master, and that was a big if, he hadn't touched Kushina in any way, so it couldn't be his doing. It's probably just stress. The sudden attack, your battle with that kunoichi and all this mess, he said, trying to sound reassuring. It's probably taking its toll on your body, and that reflects on the seal. But you should check on it, just to be safe. She should check what? A voice asked from behind Jiraiya. The white-haired sage snapped his head in that direction, alarmed. He hadn't heard this newcomer entering the room. It was Shikaku Nara. The Sannin inwardly berated himself. Even if he was in the village and he was supposed to work on the mysterious seal, having someone sneaking undetected inside the room was not really professional for a shinobi of his caliber. Not even his worries about the Mini Minato were excuse enough. Oh great, he thought, now I'm calling that prisoner by Kushina's nickname, too. I was saying she should check her findings about the seal in the restricted library, he said, realizing that Shikaku was expecting a response. Even if Shikaku had recently been appointed to Jonin commander, Jiraiya wasn't aware if the Nara knew about Kushina's Jinchuriki status. He made a mental note to ask Minato about that later, just to be sure. Really, said Shikaku neutrally. What did you guys find out? The seal isn't a teleporting seal. Kushina sing-songed gleefully. At the Jonin's puzzled look, Jiraiya gestured for him to not ask about the woman's behavior. He didn't want to explain Kushina's attitude in front of her. She packed quite a punch, even if it wasn't quite as bad as Tsunade's. So what does it do, exactly? The Nara asked, probably deciding it would have been too troublesome to ask about Kushina's strange, and hopefully temporary, manners. We don't know yet. The woman sang again. What she means is that the teleportation of the whole building was just a side effect, or a secondary purpose of the seal. We are still trying to understand its main function, Jiraiya explained in an apologetic tone. He thought that his way was more elegant, even if it said the same thing. Troublesome, muttered the Nara. Jiraiya was wondering how Shikaku had been able to talk to someone for so long without saying it. Why are you here, Nara-san? The Sannin asked courteously. After all, if the Jonin commander had come, there had to be a reason. I wanted to examine the building. I didn't have a chance to before, and I was hoping to find some leverage for the prisoners' interrogations. Leverage? Yes, by examining their personal effects. Have they been collected yet? No, there's a lot of evidence and only one team, he replied. Most of the evidence was actually garbage, but apparently young Masahiro had given special instructions for that task. I'll speak to them, then. Shikaku replied, scratching his hair. Oh, one more thing, Jiraiya-sama. Hokage-sama has asked for your presence. He needs to speak with you. Really? About what? Jiraiya asked, confused. After all, Minato knew that he was examining the seal. He hoped that his student wasn't expecting a report about it so soon. No idea. You know how Minato is when he puts his Hokage face on, Shikaku smirked. True, Jiraiya knew what he meant. Better not let the brat wait, then, he muttered, before addressing Kushina. Remember to check that thing we spoke about. After Kushina's serious nod, Jiraiya bid farewell to Shikaku and left the room, wondering what his pupil could want from him. His world had lost all color, and been replaced with suffering. He knew, on some academic level, that it wasn't real. Not for the first time over the past few hours, he berated himself for having been caught in the prisoner's Sasuke's genjutsu. You seem to be accustoming yourself to this, his tormentor's voice said. Should we change scenery again? After all, it has been almost half a day since the last time. Strangely, his captor's voice wasn't Sasuke's. Since the genjutsu was so powerful, he shouldn't have been surprised. Altering a voice was nothing compared to making him feel pain like it was real. It seemed that Sasuke's control on the illusion was total, which was extremely impressive. Orochimaru wasn't even able to move his body if the bastard Uchiha didn't want him to. Such a shame he wasn't born in the village. Such potential. Orochimaru absently wondered if it was possible to replicate the genjutsu without the Sharingan. Unlikely. Eye contact had been the trigger, so the Uchiha clan's jujutsu was obviously necessary. Additionally, genjutsu wasn't the field he was most proficient in, but formulating theories about how to create a similar illusion, even without a Sharingan eye, helped distract him from the excruciating pain of the torture as the metal instruments worked on his skin. Suddenly, the world changed once again. It was still dominated by black and white, but he was strapped to a metal chair, shirtless. Moving his eyes, Sasuke probably wanted him to see the new surroundings. He saw various medical equipment. There's not much time left. Better make the best of it, right? His captor said, passing just barely out of the corner of his eye. He couldn't see a face, but he was sure that it was Sasuke using some sort of fake appearance. But for what reason? You know, Sasuke-kun, the Sannin said. This genjutsu of yours would really be useful for interrogating a prisoner. Very advanced. Very real. Too bad you aren't even asking. Silence, the voice told him coldly. He felt a small pang of pain as a syringe punctured his neck. A burning sensation followed as a liquid and illusory one, he reminded himself was injected into his veins. This is new. Maybe he is trying to be more original. His thoughts were interrupted as his body convulsed violently when the illusionary substance started to make his blood boil from the inside, cooking his muscle tissue. It was extremely unpleasant. And slow. On purpose, of course. Orochimaru decided to distract himself by formulating a few hypotheses about the liquid's composition. When the time of his death arrived, he had already discarded half a dozen and filed a couple of possible brews in his mind, to test later on some lab rat. It helped somehow with his agony. For the whole time, he could see Sasuke's hands scribbling something on a notepad. Let's move on, said his captor. Orochimaru found himself restored once again to perfect health. The pain of the last ordeal was completely gone. Just like all the other times. And once again, he was denied the sight of Sasuke's illusionary face. Had it not been for the pain and the experiments that exceeded any scientific ethic, he would have defined it a monotone experience. Are you even trying to accomplish anything with all this? He asked, sounding smug even if he was inwardly grateful for the small pause. Funny, snorted non-Sasuke's voice after a while. I could ask the very same question to you. The black and white world shifted again, and now the snake Sannin was tied to an operating table. A set of surgical lights was shining above him, illuminating his prone form completely, partially blinding him and hiding from him what lied beside of his new restraints. It was strange because in this genjutsu, the bright was black and the dark was white. Are you ready to begin? Asked the voice, whispering. Orochimaru heard the familiar snap of latex gloves somewhere in the whiteness, but he couldn't move his eyes. Then he felt pain in his torso. Even if he couldn't see, he knew what was happening. Sasuke was slicing his skin with a scalpel. Another invasive surgery without anesthetic. You are really out of ideas, are you not, Sasuke-kun? No. I saved the best for last, the voice once again replied with annoyance. As he said this, his improvised surgeon started to traffic inside his ribcage with some other tool. Let the boy have his fun. Orochimaru was one of the Sannin. He had endured much worse wounds in the real life outside of this illusion. He and his teammates had fought against Hanzo the Salamander, and survived. This was nothing. Then he heard the sound of flesh being cut, unutterable agony, and the feeling of having something extracted from his abdomen, all in rapid succession. Not screaming required all his willpower. What had his idiotic friend, Jiraiya, said all the time? Something about how a shinobi is one who must endure. And endure he would. He would endure the pain, knowing it was just a trick of his mind. He would ignore the humiliation of being powerless, because outside of this fake world, he was in charge. He would repay the illegitimate Uchiha spawn tenfold for this. He felt discomfort as something was introduced inside him. The sound of medical machinery could be heard, roaring to life as his torturer turned it on. Life support equipment, I assume. He croaked. The sensation of having another part of him removed was the only answer he received. Ah, I see. Vivisection, he simply stated. Kukukuku. No. I'm just making room. That was not what Orochimaru was expecting. A transplant then, room. For a new organ, perhaps. Oh, don't be silly, now, his captor said. Something was thrown on the floor, with a squashing noise. I'm making room for me. The tone made Orochimaru stop his line of thought. There was something in that cold voice just now. Something terrible. He felt himself forced to move his gaze towards his captive-turned-captor, which he hadn't been able to do, before. The black and white started to fade, and the world was given a much more mundane coloration. He briefly wondered why it happened just now. As he thought, the man beside him was not Sasuke. It was Orochimaru himself. But this snake Sannin was different in appearance. His hands were covered by blood-stained gloves, that were still tightened around his sliced innards. He was wearing a plain garb with black pants, which made stand even more the strange, rope-like purple belt around his hips. The smirk plastered on his face, instead. That smirk made him the real Orochimaru. He had to remember that feel like a lab rat rather than a human. It reflected no pleasure at the pain its owner, only the cold, hard satisfaction that Orochimaru himself felt after many a successful experiments. And the eyes. Kami, those eyes. They were like those of a predator, who had cornered his prey. And he could see his own reflection in them. What's the meaning of this? He demanded of his double. The anger he was feeling for being mocked like that had helped to snap out of his surprise. Instead of answering, the second Orochimaru's smirk morphed into a full, maniacal sneer. Then the illusionary Sannin's pale skin started to twitch and bloat, like if something inside wanted to be set free. And it did, tearing the body from within, discarding it like a useless, shredded husk. Orochimaru was staring at a monster. A twisted parody of his own face was the head of the creature, whose body was covered by white scales. Said scales were constantly shivering and moving, and it was then that the Sannin realized that those were not scales. They were snakes. A myriad of white snakes, that were composing this abomination. The giant, composed snake coiled his bleached body, hissing, and then sprang towards him. Into him, disappearing into the gaping hole in Orochimaru's pale frame. Orochimaru screamed. He could feel that thing moving inside him, slithering in his body. Merging with him, absorbing him. His consciousness was starting to fade, and he could feel another presence replace it, making his body its own vessel. The Sannin's scream stopped only when he ceased to exist, consumed by the creature that was now inhabiting his body. When Orochimaru opened his eyes, he was staring at Sasuke's horrible, terrifying eyes. Sasuke was sitting on his metal chair, unable to move because of his restraints. Orochimaru himself was sitting on a chair, but he was not restrained. He was in the cell. The genjutsu was over. It was over, right? Was the cell real? You're awake just because I want you to be, Sasuke said in a voice that was not a prisoner's. He heard a loud slam behind him, but he wasn't able to look away from the red, spinning eyes. Two figures raced beside him. A pair of strong hands pulled him away, just when a sack was placed on the Sasuke's head. The Uchiha guards. The ones that were surveilling the cell through the security camera. They had entered just as the blindfold had fallen from Sasuke's face, and now they were dragging him out. Orochimaru-sama. Are you harmed? The one who had led him out of the cell asked, alarmed. How much time had really passed? Orochimaru-sama, are all you alright? Can you hear me? Repeated the guard, concerned with the Sannin's silence. I'm fine, he said, snapping out from his shocked state. He would not let anyone see him like that. A little genjutsu from the prisoner would never affect me that much, but still, I was careless. He stared intently at the passed-out guards who had failed to interrogate the prisoner before him as the other Uchiha closed the cell's door. What had Sasuke shown them? I must give you my gratitude, Uchiha-san. Even if I was not in real danger, you two intervened promptly, he stated. A little praise from his part would probably prevent them from gossiping about the incident in a negative manner. He couldn't afford voices of that kind to circle around the village. The guards looked pleased, of course. After all, they had just been complimented by the snail Sannin, not exactly a common thing. Some would have even considered it an honor, actually. Now, assure that the prisoner is safe, he continued. I must go to ask audience with the Hokage. Orochimaru-sama, what about the prisoner's interrogation? Asked one of the guards, confused. That's the reason I need to see the Hokage, Orochimaru replied slyly. I want to request a Yamanaka special for our precious Sasuke-kun. A sake bottle, empty, said Kakashi Hatake as he put the item in a plastic bag and passed it to Asuma. The young Sarutobi immediately put a tag on the item and passed it to Kurenai Yuhi, who placed it on the top of the pile of junk that, per Masahiro's orders, had to be considered evidence. Evidence of what, Ayumi didn't know. She just wrote the item in the inventory where she had already signed all the previous evidence, which was mostly composed by empty sake bottles. Or smashed sake bottles. Another sake bottle. Empty, said Kakashi again, in a bored tone. Ayumi didn't know how he could maintain at least a facade of professionalism. Since the Konoha military police force was stretched thin, he and his temporary team had been assigned to the investigation on the building, with the exception of that green-clad Chunin, who had been taken to the hospital. Apparently, he had overexerted himself during the fight, or something like that. The investigation looked more like a D-rank mission with the goal of cleaning up. But since the hopefully temporary leader of the Uchiha police had decided to treat this assignment like a scene of crime, Ayumi was forced to collect, with her team's help, every item inside of the building. Luckily for her and the poor auxiliary team, the floor where Jiraiya-sama and Uzumaki-san were examining that strange seal had already been cleared. So they had to clean only the other four, joy. And they still had to finish the one they started from, the top one where Hokage-sama fought one of the intruders. And she hadn't even been able to ask for Jiraiya-sama to autograph on her limited Ika volume. Stupid Masahiro Nii. She whispered. Another bottle, the silver-haired Jonin said, once again passing a plastic-wrapped item to Asuma. This must have been one hell of a party. Too bad these guys are enemies, the Chunin said. Come on, Asuma. That doesn't make sense. Who would party hard before an attack? Kurenai asked, taking the bottle from the fellow Chunin and tossing it on the pile. An empty ramen cup. Pork-flavored, said Kakashi, ignoring them. Ayumi noticed that he seemed to do that a lot. You tell me why there's so much alcohol here, then, Asuma challenged. A pair of orange boxers. Seems we found something different, for a change, Kakashi remarked. Indeed, it was the first item they had found that wasn't an empty container of some sorts. Well, maybe. A black bra, the Jonin said, interrupting the conversation. A black what? Ayumi asked, puzzled. I said, Kakashi stated, in a louder tone, a black bra. With the straps broken. Nobody had something to say as Kakashi passed the feminine undergarment to Asuma after putting it into a plastic bag. A box of condoms, empty. What did I tell you? The male Chunin asked his female peer. They party hard. A condom, Kakashi kept listing, holding the up object which still wrapped in its package. He put that inside a plastic bag, too. We're almost out of those, you know. Asked Ayumi, adding the last item to the list. She would need a new notepad soon, too. Instead of answering, Kakashi just drew a kunai in a swift motion. Everybody tensed, alarmed by his sudden movement, but the Jonin merely crouched and examined something on the floor. Used one, Kakashi said neutrally as he rose to his feet. He was holding the kunai with only 2 fingers, and the mentioned item was hanging from the weapon's tip. That's disgusting. Kurenai lamented, taking a few steps back. Well, we have a DNA sample, at least. Asuma asked, hoping to sound optimistic. Damn you, Masahiro Nii. Ayumi whispered. There will be a reckoning. We have plenty of samples from saliva inside the bottles, Asuma. Kurenai retorted. Well, I think this proves my theory, Asuma said, ignoring his friend's protest. And what theory is that? A voice asked. The teen shinobi turned to face the newcomer. It was Shikaku Nara, the Jonin commander. What was he doing here? I think that our invaders had a giant celebration right before the attack, sir, explained Asuma, with a strained professional tone. I see, muttered Shikaku. As in, a propitiatory party? The last night before the battle, judging by the quantity of consumed alcoholic beverages, I think it was more like, partying like there is no tomorrow, sir, the Chunin explained. The other, items suggest something similar. Which items? The Nara demanded, arching his unscarred eyebrow. These ones, Nara-san, Ayumi called, passing to the Jonin commander the bags containing the latest retrieved items. The Nara genius examined them, shuffling the plastic containers. With every single item, his frown became more and more confused. I found another too. Kakashi called. Damn it, Kakashi. Don't waggle them this way. Kurenai roared. Nara-san? Ayumi asked, ignoring the two's antics, trying to catch the officer's attention. He seemed to be mesmerized by the 3 disturbing pieces of evidence in his hands. Thank you for your time, Uchiha-san, the Jonin commander said, shoving the bags in Ayumi's hands. Then he just turned on his heels and left the room, leave the poor Ayumi confused. Asuma, take this kunai. Go outside, and I don't care how, burn it, she heard Kakashi say in the background. If the Jonin commander left so soon, then why did he come at all? Canary was silently strolling the corridor. Of course he was walking silently, he was an ANBU after all. But his stride was slightly different from the usual ANBU gait, more like a convicted felon walking towards the execution room on his own than a warrior of the shadows. He sure felt that way. The item in his left hand felt so heavy. Open the door, he said in his communicator. Almost immediately, the mechanism started to open the cell's access with an hissing sound, depressuring the metal door. Once it was completely open, the prisoner was already staring in its direction with a hopeful expression. But once he actually saw him, hope quickly gave way to disappointment. Who was he expecting to see? Canary ignored the strapped prisoner's questions about his identity and just approached the seal-covered blonde teen. Hey! I'm talking to you, jerk. Do you know how long I've been holding it in? The prisoner asked. That's exactly why I'm here, Canary replied in a sad tone. He let the bag he was carrying fall to the ground with a loud thud. That silenced the prisoner. The sound of the zipper intrigued him. The items Canary got out of the bag, they terrified him. What do you think you're doing with that? The captive literally shrieked. Trust me, prisoner. For me, doing this is far worse, the ANBU said, rising the bedpan. It was a dirty job, but someone had to do it. Just like that very morning, Hiruzen Sarutobi was sitting in his porch. But unlike some hours ago, he was not alone this time. I see that Biwako's tea is delicious, as always, his guest stated in a monotone. Of course, he had checked the hot beverage for poisons before sipping it. As always, you say. How long has it been since the last time we enjoyed tea together, Danzo? 20 years. Hiruzen asked of his old comrade. 30, the crippled shinobi said, flatly. Why did you invite me here, Hiruzen? Surely not to talk about the old days. We're both growing old, Danzo. It's only natural to reminisce about our past glories, sometimes. Hiruzen, Danzo said drily. The retired shinobi had never been one for pleasantries. Do you remember that time during the first war when you, me, and that Jonin, what was his name, when we infiltrated IWA? The retired Hokage asked, not really listening to his former friend's pressing tone. He poured a little more tea in his own cup, knowing that the old war hawk was trying to understand what he was driving at. We succeeded, of course. We brought back the intelligence, just as the Nidaime asked of us. We acquired a great advantage for our forces that probably shortened the war by months. The aging Sarutobi kept talking. Ironically, that led to the battle where Tobarama Senju sacrificed himself, all to allow us and our comrades to return to Konoha. The Nidaime's last stand, Danzo said, putting down his own cup. It was the night you were named Hokage. I remember it very well. Hiruzen nodded, drinking a long swig from his cup. You will also remember how we pulled out the infiltration inside Iwa's walls, he said dramatically. We had inside help. Both men stood still in silence, without breaking eye contact. It was only thanks to help from inside IWA that we managed to enter inside the Tsuchikige's archives. And it took months of preparations, too. Are you accusing me? Danzo interrupted, with a voice so cold that it could have frozen fire. No need to be smooth about it, apparently. With Danzo, it rarely was. An ANBU operative has found evidence about one of your personal agents amongst the enemy's ranks, Hiruzen sighed. At that, his guest tensed. Even if officially Root had been disbanded, he was aware of its current status. For the sake of the village well-being, he had avoided to confront his former friend and rival about it. But now, they were discussing about a potential treason accusation. What kind of evidence are you speaking of, Hiruzen? The agent overheard two infiltrators speaking about the training one of them had received en route, apparently. The conversation has been recorded, of course. That's your proof? Danzo asked flatly. Two enemies so focused on gossiping that they didn't even notice the shinobi who was eavesdropping them. It's not exactly solid evidence, Hiruzen. Danzo, the former Hokage hissed, deadly serious. He was tired of this chase as well. How is Root involved into this? Instead of answering immediately, the shadow group's leader inhaled deeply, enjoying the tea's aroma. His only visible eye flickered for an instant around the garden. Without a doubt, he had spotted the ANBU hidden in the garden. Or at least some of them. Nothing, he finally responded. What? Hiruzen blinked. It wasn't the answer he was expecting. We had nothing to do with the attack. There was another pause, where the two studied each other. Hiruzen had been called the god of shinobi more than once, even if he had a personal preference for the nickname of the professor. With his experience, he was able to discern a person's intentions with a single eye contact. Hiruzen was sure he was telling the truth. But he also knew that Danzo was a great shinobi, a legend in his own right. Sadly, he had chosen to delve into the dirtier aspects of the ninja world. The War Hawk was a skilled liar, a master of deception and with a cunning mind to boot. Hiruzen couldn't exclude the possibility that he was being deceived, or that his own judgment was clouded by the feeble friendship he still treasured between him and his rival. How can you accuse me, Hiruzen? You should know I would never work against the Leaf, Danzo said, caught in the middle between a hiss and a whisper. Danzo, we can't exclude anything. What we found out. And what, exactly did you find out? That's classified, you should know that, Hiruzen cut short, taking another quick sip from his cup. The bandaged shinobi had just tried to counter-interrogate him on his own porch. Unbelievable. He decided to change the topic. Where were your forces when the village was attacked? The attack caught us completely by surprise, Danzo said, a hint of shame and irritation in his words. Since Root is a secret splinter group of ANBU who is involved in Black Ops, I ordered them to stand back as the other shinobi joined the fray. And of course, helping your fellow Konoha shinobi would have exposed the existence of your personal force, Hiruzen muttered drily. Of course, Danzo said. When will I be able to interrogate this agent you speak of? Why are you asking me? He snorted. I'm not the Hokage anymore, Danzo. Minato is. You will have to ask his permission to see that prisoner, and I doubt he will agree to your request. Then he is a fool. Just as I always thought, his former friend stated simply, with no animosity in his voice. I still don't understand why you chose him as your successor. I had my reasons, and you know it, he said with a little mirth in his voice. A small smile formed on Hiruzen's lips, almost against his will. Please, Hiruzen. Don't start with your will of fire speech, Danzo protested. We're not here to discuss a philosophy. Indeed. We are here for your informal interrogation. You're still under suspicion, until more evidence is found, of course. Danzo made a ghost of a snort. You mean, until you find out that I'm completely unrelated to this incident? I truly hope so, my old friend, Hiruzen said, taking out his pipe from his kimono. He really felt the need for a drag. I'm sure that Hokage-sama will summon you in his office, sooner or later. For another informal talk between you and him. You will be able to hear the recorded conversation then, I think. In that case, you will pardon me if I take my leave, Hiruzen, the War Hawk said, rising slowly, using his cane to support himself. Hiruzen didn't move to help him, as he put his favorite tobacco into the pipe. Danzo would have never forgiven him. Thank you for the tea, Danzo said, starting to walk towards the exit of the Sarutobi household. Hiruzen lit up his pipe and took a long drag. Things would sure be interesting in the next days. Absently, he wondered how the interrogations were going. Sai was a little confused about why an enemy interrogator would henge as a shinobi whose death was well known in all the ninja world. Aren't you going to answer to my question? The man masquerading as Shikaku Nara asked. It's impolite to not introduce yourself, you know. Sai just remained silent, his face completely devoid of any emotion. It came easily for him. After all, he had spent most of his life without even being able to feel them. All he had to do was switch them off, like a light bulb. Fine, I'll go first. I am Shikaku Nara, Jonin commander of Konoha's main military branch. So, what's your name? The pale shinobi ignored once again the question and just formed a small smile on his lips. That seemed to annoy his interrogator a bit. Good. Before the attack, our recon obtained intel suggesting your affiliation with Root. Tell me about it. At this new request, Sai formed his trademark smile, the one he used to do to annoy Naruto. Judging by the small tick on the enemy's frown, it was working wonderfully. Without his training, he wouldn't have noticed it. Do you realize how much trouble you're in? The man asked. Konoha is not merciful to traitors. Especially with ANBU going rogue, such as a former Root operative. If you want to be shown some kind of clemency, cooperate with me. Sai showed the fake Konoha what he thought about his clemency. He shrugged. You're not helping your case, you know, the now frustrated man said. The former Root agent formed his trademark creepy smile, the one that used to enrage Naruto and Sakura, and giggled. Fine, be that way, his interrogator said. We'll see if you'll smile when I'll send one of the Yamanaka clansmen to have a nice chat with you. As the man left the room, Sai's eyes widened imperceptibly. The man was not lying, he could feel it from his body language. But how had these enemies obtained the services of a Yamanaka? A group of them, too. As the pounding at the door grew louder, Masahiro decided that being the boss, sometimes, sucked. Apparently, after the initial chaos provoked by the attack and the sudden evacuation of the area around the building, words about the enemy's capture had spread among the civilians, who had tried to return to their homes. But the location was still closed off to the population since the investigation was still ongoing, and their wishes had been denied. The problem was that the shinobi that stopped them had been a Uchiha of the police force, who was patrolling the perimeter. So, instead of going to the Hokage Tower, where they would have been stopped on the ground floor by the security, they had come to the military police force's headquarters, which was operating on a skeleton crew. And now, a few dozens of families were right out of Masahiro's temporary office's door, demanding to speak with him. The censor type wasn't really in the mood to deal with the unreasonable civilians. Maybe he could have put all them in a happy place genjutsu. He scratched that thought. Too bothersome. What would a great leader do? Shibi Aburame raised his head as his sentry bugs alerted him of the man's approaching. Shikaku Nara, the cunning strategist of the Inoshikacho trio, was coming to visit. He already knew the reason. Why? Because it was logical. Good evening, Shikaku, he said, just as the man entered the room. Shibi. Always a pleasure, the other shinobi greeted. Even if they were little more than acquaintances, they had come to an understanding because of the way they thought, because of the ironclad grip of logic on their souls. I suppose you are here to interrogate the young shinobi who surrendered to me, Shibi said. It wasn't a question. Why? Because he would have done the same thing. Yes, actually. I could require your assistance as well, the Jonin commander said. I've heard that the prisoner has some insect-based abilities similar to those of your clan. Is this true? Correct. He has such abilities. That's why my father appointed my fellow clansmen to guard him. What measures have been taken to contain his bugs? Shikaku asked, contemplating. We didn't do such a thing, Shibi answered. Why? Because the young man is not a menace. Why? Because our insects have communed. The Nara clan head's eyebrows raised up before they rippled in a frown. What do you mean, your insects have communed? He asked. I mean that our respective allies started to exchange informations about each other's colony, which can happen only among their own. Why? Because he has the same insects of the Aburame clan. Said insects can be hosted only inside the body of an Aburame. Why? Because of our body's peculiar biology. You think that the enemy prisoner, Shikaku stated, slowly, is an Aburame. I don't think. I know. Why? Because, let me guess, because your insects told you. The Nara asked, a little frustration in his voice. Correct, was Shibi's neutral statement. And where did this Aburame came from? From Konoha, I suppose. Why? Because the insects told you. Yes. That doesn't make any sense, Shibi. Have you ever seen your so-called Aburame before? No, Shibi replied after a moment of contemplation. I've never seen him before. But I trust my ally's judgment. I see. There was a long silence between the two men, and Shibi could see the gears in Shikaku's turning behind his eyes. Then, turning slowly, the Nara left, muttering something that suspiciously sounded like troublesome Aburame. Masahiro was now sure that, hadn't he taken the family's career choice, he would have been able to become a great evil overlord, written with capital letters. With a single maneuver, he had been able to turn a potential disaster in something glorious. Or at least, something that wasn't bothering him, which was glorious in his own opinion. The solution had been simple and yet elegant, a work of genius. He delegated the task to his minions. That would have been the headquarters skeleton crew. Masahiro-sama, please. There is some old guy here who has just arrived. He insists that his house has been stolen by a large family. Could you? A voice said at his earphone, just a second before he turned it off. The fact that some other Uchiha clansmen were actually interacting with the civilian population was an unexpected bonus. For some reason, Masahiro felt the need to pet a cat while monologuing, but he ignored it. Life was good. The room was starkly white, and the strong lights were emphasizing that. Hinata was sitting on a chair in the middle of it. She couldn't move much due to the straitjacket that was restraining her. In front of her, there was a simple table with another chair on the other side of it. It had been almost 1 hour since she'd woken up, or at least she thought so. She couldn't use her Byakugan to check her surroundings because, last time she tried, guards had rushed inside, screaming at her, ordering her to stand down. It was obvious that the guards were Hyuga, since they all had her same Dijitsu. Why were they so hostile, then? Why didn't they recognize her? What was going on? There were no Hyuga missing that she was aware of. Where did they come from? She heard the door opening, and a single figure entered. As Hinata raised her head to see who was this visitor, she did a double take. It was Shikamaru's father, Shikaku Nara, who had died during the Fourth Shinobi War. Apparently, her mysterious captors not only had some rogue Hyuga in their midst. But why would this shinobi assume the aspect of a deceased Konoha clan head? One she was not really familiar with, to boot. Her visitor sat in the other chair in a lazy slouch, never breaking eye contact. And then he just remained completely silent. Hinata decided that two could play at that game. And because of this decision, she lost quite a few staring contests. So, the man said, breaking the long silence. What's your name? Hinata, she said hesitantly. No family name? He asked, a small smile forming on his face. Hinata blinked in surprise. They couldn't tell from her eyes. Who were these people? Hinata Hyuga, she clarified. Hinata Hyuga, the stranger repeated, like he was tasting the name. Where are you from, Hinata? The pale-eyed young woman stared at him, incredulous. Sorry if I ask, she started, timidly. Nara-san will be fine, the now christened Nara-san filled. Nara-san, she said. No need to annoy her captors, after all. Is this an interrogation? I think it's pretty obvious, he responded, arching an eyebrow. Where are you from? You don't know that already? Hinata asked, genuinely confused. Hadn't these people attacked the village? If I knew that, I wouldn't be asking it. I'm from Konoha, she said, albeit reluctantly. Even if she wasn't giving away sensitive information, she felt a little guilty responding to the man's question. At that answer, her interrogator's eyes widened slightly, the only visible sign of his surprise. I see, he said, reaching for the interior of his vest. Hinata followed his movements waringly. Not that she would have been able to defend herself efficiently, restrained by the straitjacket. Who is this? Do you know him? The man asked, putting a picture on the table, right under Hinata's nose. It was Hinata's turn to widen her eyes, but she wasn't able to hide her shock. This is Niji Nii-san, she whispered. It was the photo they had used for the improvised shrine to honor her cousin's memory. Why had they taken it during the attack? I see, Nara-san stated. Tell me, did this Nii-san take you away from Konoha when you were young? I mean, really young. What? Hinata asked, raising her voice a little. I was born and raised in Konoha, and you should know this already. I see, the man murmured, turning very serious. Tell me, Hinata, is this the man who taught you the gentle fist? No, of course not, Hinata replied, puzzled. My father did. Who is your father? Nara-san pressed. Hinata was starting to feel uneasy under the man's scrutinizing eyes. Hayashi Hyuga, the clan head, she mumbled. Really, now, he whispered so softly that Hinata wasn't sure she heard that. One more thing. Why was Niji not with you or the others present in the building? At that, Hinata's eyes hardened. Because he died in the war, she said coldly, leaking a little of killing intent to accentuate her statement. Did he? Nara-san asked, frowning. Hinata and the man who was impersonating Shikamaru's father were locked again in a staring match, but this time she wasn't going to be coy. Then, without any forewarning, Nara-san got up and started to walk towards the exit. Thank you for your time, Hinata, he said, opening the door. You can keep the picture, for now. And Hinata was alone, once again. What kind of interrogation was that? Hey kid. Never let your girlfriend drink coffee. Trust me, it's good advice, Jiraiya said as he entered inside the Hokage's office using the ever-open window. So, what did you need to ask me? Jiraiya, Minato said, uncharacteristically sullen. Take a seat. That was not a good sign. What happened? Alright, Minato. Why the long face? He asked, leaning on the desk's edge. I spoke to the prisoner, Minato stated, resting his chin on steepled hands. Really? Which one? We have quite a few of them, the Toad Sannin snarked, hoping to lighten his former apprentice's mood. You know which one, Minato replied, growling. The sage who attacked me. Ah, you mean Mini Minato, the Sannin grinned. He was quite proud of his idea to stop the young blonde from gathering natural energy with those seals, especially because he'd had little time to design and plant them. Mini Minato? The real Minato asked, with a puzzled face. Kushina's nickname for your failed doppelganger, he clarified. The explanation gained a soft snort from the yondaime. So, what's his name? Jiraiya asked. What? Minato whispered, slowly lowering his hands and finally meeting Jiraiya's eyes. The name of Mini Minato. Did he tell you a name? The yondaime's eyes widened a little, like he realized something. Minato? Are you alright? Jiraiya had to ask after a few seconds, with a worried tone. I forgot to ask him, Minato confessed. You forgot, the Sannin said, his face morphing from concern to incredulity at incredible speed. The blond man's response was simple. His cheeks became a pale red color. You forgot. Jiraiya repeated, real affront in his voice. He started screaming as soon as he saw me, alright? He didn't stop for minutes. He actually had to gasp for air towards the end. Minato, that's the first thing you ask for. Names. Oh, I got a name, actually. That's why I called for you, the Hokage said, mood suddenly reverted to his previous state. As for the prisoner, his interrogation has been taken care for. What do you mean? It has been taken care for, Minato repeated in a distant tone. The door creaked open and Jiraiya had to cut his inquiry when he sensed who just entered the Hokage's office. Orochimaru, welcome, Minato greeted. I'm sorry to have summoned both of you with such short notice. Actually, Hokage-sama, Orochimaru said, taken a little aback, I've come here on my own initiative. There's something I need to discuss with you. Jiraiya winced at his friend's tone. It was no secret that he had coveted the position of Hokage and he was probably still burning in jealousy for having lost to a much younger candidate. Oh. Minato said, confused. If the yondaime had noticed the slight malice that Orochimaru had put into the honorific, he didn't show it. He had probably sent some messenger out to fetch his teammate, Jiraiya's thought. But apparently, his friend had come on his own. And he seemed a little off. Hey, Orochi, are you alright? He asked. You look paler than usual. Shut up, Jiraiya, the long-haired man said in a flat tone. Hey, don't be like that. The Toad Sannin whined. I was just concerned. You just look. Mind your own business, his teammate spat. I was worried for you, you stupid jerkass. A loud cough interrupted the two arguing men, as they were remembered that they were in the presence of the Hokage. For a moment Jiraiya had a sense of déjà vu as he remembered various similar scenes. Those times, though, they used to be younger, Tsunadeheim would have joined into the discussion, probably to chastise him, and behind the desk his sensei would watch them all with a scolding stare. But this time, the stare he was receiving belonged to his student, so it was slightly embarrassing. Beside him, Orochimaru snickered, probably remembering some similar episode himself. "Shut up, snake face," he muttered, glaring. "Says the toad," was the flat reply. "Why, you, enough. We have more important things to discuss." Minato thundered. Deja vu indeed. "Alright, sorry Minato." "You're right," he said, in a placating manner. "So, what do you want to discuss about?" "The interrogation of the blonde prisoner has given us troubling news," his student said, tightening his hands. "But first, I want you to tell me all you found on the unstable seal, Jiraiya-sensei. Where should I start?" "We found out that the seal is unstable on purpose." "Well," Jiraiya snorted, "it was actually Kushina-chan who figured it out." The other two men in the room tensed. Unstable seals were not to be taken lightly. "What do you mean, it was made unstable on purpose?" Orochimaru asked, incredulous. "It's not a teleportation seal. It's not even remotely stable. There are dozens of incomplete components that balance each other, and that's the only thing keeping Konoha on the map right now," he explained in a matter-of-fact tone. Minato whitened. Orochimaru's eyes bulged. "Yeah, that's how I felt when I realized it," he continued with a sigh. "As for what it actually does, I'm not sure. It was kinda hard when the seals were moving. But I think that the building's appearance was a side effect, having the seal drawn on its floor and all that." Seeing the other shinobi remaining completely silent, he decided to keep going. It was time to tell the bad news. "So, the prisoners," he awkwardly scratched the back of his head. "Do you think we missed any one of them?" "I'm pretty sure that there should be more of them." "Why are you asking that?" Minato frowned. "I visited the cells, Jiraiya. Speaking to the guards, all the people who this morning appeared along the building are now in our custody. And they had all been detected by that Uchiha Sensonin," Orochimaru filled in, giving his own opinion. "Time to drop the explosive tag. The fact that there's no way in hell that that seal could have been made without at least 12 seal masters moving in unison." Now it was Minato's eyes that bulged, whilst Orochimaru simply stood there, listening with growing incredulity. 12. The pale Sannin exploded, unable to remain silent at this turn of events. "At least," he reminded. "Please, tell me that you think that Mini Minato is one of the seal masters," Minato pleaded. "Who is Mini Minato? And why are you hoping that he is one of the enemy's seal masters?" Orochimaru asked, confused. "The prisoner located in the highest security cell. He can use the Kagebushin no Jutsu," Minato explained. "During our fight he seemed to rely on it very much, actually. If he is a seal master, we have explanation for the other ones. Did he seem like a seal master to you? Maybe he just put his chakra into it?" he asked, even if he had his doubts. Minato didn't falter. "He managed to copy my techniques. Hell, he completed one of my techniques. And he's a sage. Is it really that far of a stretch for him to be a seal master?" "You've got a point," Jiraiya groaned. He would have preferred to face a dozen seal masters than a single one who had managed to master the sage mode, but it was just wishful thinking. Everything pointed to that mysterious blonde being somehow responsible for the seal. Still, Orochimaru said, finding his usual cool demeanor, these shinobi had to have come from somewhere. They had to be trained by someone. "Do we have any leads?" "We do," Minato admitted, the previous dour mood restored. "But wasn't there something you wanted to discuss with me, Orochimaru?" "I just wanted to ask for a special measure for one of the prisoners, but that can wait." "This is a more important matter," Orochimaru said firmly. "Very well," the Hokage sighed. He seemed really reluctant to tell them about the prisoner's interrogation. Jiraiya was sure now. "Let's start with the simple things. We know for sure that the intruders were in possession of not only techniques and jutsu exclusive of the village, or of its clans, but even 2 Dijitsu as well. The Sharingan," Orochimaru said. "Did his left eye just twitch? And the Byakugan," Minato added. "We still need to know if the eyes of the 2 prisoners are their own or transplanted. I've ordered a medical examination on those 2. But in case they're not transplants," the pale Sannin muttered. "I interrogated the boy, the one with the Sharingan. He is probably of Uchiha blood. Are you sure?" Jiraiya asked, puzzled. "Yes," was the flat response he received, along a slight frown. "All right." In any case, Minato continued, to be able to obtain them, Jujutsu and techniques both, the responsible is surely familiar with Konoha and the story of its clans. Minato, stop stalling and tell us what's going on, Jiraiya said. He had used the same tone from when he was a Jonin sensei and was reprimanding his students. Hopefully that would snap the blonde man out of it. Orochimaru nodded. Evidently he wasn't happy about the Yandame's hesitant explanation either. Those details, the abilities of one of the attackers, and the interrogation of the blonde prisoner gave me enough evidence to come to the conclusion that this invasion was orchestrated by Tsunade. An hand slammed on the Hokage's desk, sending paperwork flying throughout the room. Surprisingly, Orochimaru was the responsible while Jiraiya simply glared coldly at his former student, arms crossed. What evidence? The pale Sannin hissed. Minato sighed, and opened one of the desk's drawers. From it, he took out a slim folder and placed it in front of himself, one hand on the top of it. Then, he looked both Sannin in the eyes, before speaking again. At a certain point of the interrogation, after having been uncooperative until then, the prisoner snapped, and told me that Tsunade, who he referred to as Tsunade-bachan, should be Hokage instead of me. Utter disbelief was visible on Orochimaru's face. Jiraiya was sure that his own had a similar expression. That doesn't mean that Tsunade is really behind this, Minato. The prisoner was lying for sure. He protested, loudly. Just because she left doesn't mean she's a traitor, Orochimaru ceded. Both the Sannin were willingly to defend their comrade. I would think the same, had I not already seen this, Minato said, pushing the folder towards them. Jiraiya met Orochimaru's eyes. The Toad Sannin was having his doubts, but he was really hoping that his students was wrong, that he was been misled by circumstantial evidence. Also, the information had arrived from the enemy, who was probably putting them on a useless lead. Yes, that was the case, no doubt. Then why wasn't he able to reach for that folder? As he finally decided to move his hand, Orochimaru beaten him and grasped the document for himself. The pale shinobi opened it, looked at whatever was inside it, and his mouth slightly opened in disbelief. That was not a good sign. Without speaking or meeting his eyes, his teammate slowly passed to him the folder. Jiraiya reluctantly accepted it. What could shook Orochimaru like this? He unfolded it, and he could feel his blood freeze and his heart skip a bit. There were only 3 pictures of it. All of them showed an unconscious young girl, covered by sealed tags in various parts of her body. But even with those, he could tell what he was seeing. This prisoner, she is able to use the strength of 100? He slowly asked, unable to turn away his gaze. His head was spinning. Yes. Those photos were made just after her capture. The seal eventually disappeared, Minato said, sounding hollow in Jiraiya's ears. Sensei, I know that you can't accept it, but, she could have stolen her techniques, Minato. It's the only possible. Jiraiya, stop it. Don't let your emotions cloud your judgment, Orochimaru growled. Cloud my judgment? He roared, unable to contain the emotive hurricane inside himself anymore. This is Tsunade we're talking about. Her family founded Konoha. She's been our teammate under Hiruzen-sensei. She fought Hanzo alongside us. She's one of the Sannin. Do you really think she would give away her greatest techniques against her will? His old friend said, meeting his eyes with a daring look. Besides, she has reason enough to resent the village. Orochimaru's tone was almost apologetic. Almost. But in his current state, Jiraiya wasn't able to discern that. What are you blabbing Abo, Dan and Nawaki? Jiraiya's mouth snapped shut. Besides, Minato said, after a few seconds of tense silence, who else is this familiar with Konoha's clans? Medically so. And if she's really responsible, she didn't do this alone, since it requires time, resources and money to train so many high-level shinobi. As if Tsunade would have enough money, Orochimaru scoffed. Jiraiya wasn't really listening, he was still trying to come around the pictures that had changed his world upside down. Is she truly without resources? Tell me, why has she been nicknamed the legendary sucker? The Hokage inquired. Because of the fact that she is really bad at gambling, and because she has accumulated a big debt for, oh, the pale man said, eyes widening in realization. Exactly, Minato confirmed. Her debts could just be a cover for financing her operation. So, what happens now? We send a bunch of ANBU to track her down. What will their orders be orders? Assassination? And what of that girl who follows her everywhere, Shizun? Jiraiya looked aghast for a moment, and was ready to lash on his former teammate, but Minato spoke again before he could make a move. No. We need answers, so Tsunade must be captured for questioning. Should she cooperate, we'll be reasonable. But this will not be a job for ANBU, the blonde said. There is a reason I summoned you to my office. The older men looked at their Hokage, whose eyes had hardened and were staring at them, expectantly. When do we leave? Jiraiya asked, squashing the denial and confusion that had filled his heart. None of the men present in the room noticed the eye made of sand, hidden in a plant's vase, starting to dissolve. Ino was glaring. She was strapped on a chair, and was glaring at the man in front of her. The man who had dared to take her father's appearance and, shamelessly proposed to her to do, things. In the middle of their attack on the village, too. She was almost more offended by that insult, than from how the man had passed the last 2 hours trying to break her mental defenses with what felt like a rip-off of her clan's interrogation style. And a very crappy one, too. Too bad she couldn't see the look of frustration on his face, since he was behind her, with her hands on her temples. How is that possible? He lamented. Luckily for her, the sound of his voice was enough to enjoy his grievance. Ah! She snorted. Like if a cheap imitation jutsu could break my mental defenses. Imitation? I'll have you know that my family is quite renowned for our mental jutsu and techniques. So does mine, and you're not going to get anything from me. She said vehemently. Look, he said, putting a hand on her shoulder. Ino had to refrain from the instinct to pull off. If you don't give me something, the other guys of the TI department will get more physical on you. And not the way I would want to. Ugh, you're disgusting. She sneered. Didn't this guy realize that he was using her father's appearance? Oh, come on. How can you say that? I'm gorgeous. He said, moving in front of her, waving his open arms to emphasize his statement. There is no way in hell that I would be attracted by that henge. What? My manly face is not an henge. He exclaimed, in shock. He gestured at his features to emphasize his claim. Poor misinformed fool. Her father had never called himself manly in all the time she had known him. Ever. Yeah, right. And I'm not from Konoha, Ino mocked. But, you're not, the blonde man protested, confused beyond belief. Ino was on the point of chewing him out verbally since she couldn't reach him physically for obvious reasons, but noticed that another person had entered into the room. So did her father's impersonator. They had been so focused on the argument and his manly features that they had never noticed. It was one of the other imposters, the one impersonating Sheikah's father. What are you looking at, fake face? She lashed out. She really need to vent, somehow. The newcomer just blinked his eyes, puzzled. He searched his accomplice's eyes, but the blonde man just seemed embarrassed by Ino's sudden explosion, for some reason. Then he looked directly at her, and Ino felt herself like she was an interesting sample put under a researcher's microscope. After a few seconds, the man turned and left the room. Hey! Why you're leaving already? Her interrogator called. Seriously, why were they keeping on with the act? One would think that the henge would not be necessary anymore, now that they had captured them and took who knew how much away from Konoha. Man, I hope he wasn't offended by such a lame insult, he muttered, scratching his head. Didn't your parents teach you that it's bad to be rude? Ino was going to explode in a long and loud list of profanities when the door opened once more, this time violently. Another blonde man had barged inside, painting. He was young, around Ino's age and dressed in a well-made copy of a Konoha standard Chunin outfit, and it was obvious that he had been running for quite some time. Inoichi-san. The teen almost shouted. Hokage-sama has ordered the use of the Yamanaka special on one of the prisoners. What? Ino and her interrogator whispered in unison. The special was one of the more trusted secrets interrogation techniques. How were these people aware of its existence? And did they just spoke about the Hokage? Then, as he realized what had been actually said, she did a double take. Had the young blonde called the older man Benoichi? Masahiro, the self-proclaimed benevolent dictator of the Konoha military police force, was enjoying another cup of coffee as he watched the village from his office's window. Technically that wasn't his title, and the office was still Fugaku's since he was just a temporary substitute, but it was the thought that counted. Under his enlightened leadership, the Uchiha had to open themselves to the general population. The ones that were still standing after the morning's trials, at least. True, they had complained about the fact that in addition to having to do the usual duties of the police force, they had to listen to a bunch of villagers lamenting about their problems. But as long he was in charge, they would talk to the villagers, at least. They weren't happy about it, and he had to dodge a minor fire jutsu or two, but they would. Whether they wanted it or not. He was distracted from his thoughts by a series of shouts and rackets just outside the door. As he was turning, the door was blown open with a massive force, and Fugaku Uchiha entered into his own office, completely livid, followed by a very worried Mikoto who was carrying a sleepy Itachi among her arms. "You!" The Uchiha clan head thundered. "Get out of my office." That was a phrase he had heard quite a few times during his career. But this was the first time that Fugaku had shouted it wearing a hospital gown. Apparently the voices about his uncanny leadership had traveled fast. Just like the man's healing process. But this was a little unusual even for Konoha's efficient doctors and gossiping nurses. "Fugaku-sama," he said, making an elegant bow. "It's good to see you're already up and ready to return to your duties. I'll take my leave." Then he simply strolled out of the room, giving a polite greeting to the Uchiha matriarch. As Fugaku finally realized that he lacked any sort of pans, Masahiro knew that his reign had been brief, but just. "We should do something, you know." The guard asked, without stopping to watch the one-way mirror. A crunching sound was heard in the silence of the observation room. "Like what?" his friend asked. "I don't know, take them away from him. Search him for other items." "What other items? He's almost naked in there. Where could he have put them?" Another crunching sound. "Then can you explain to me why?" Their bickering was interrupted by the Jonin commander entering the observation room. "Sir." The two saluted, receiving a nod in response. Instead of speaking, the newcomer just stared at the mirror, and the prisoner in the cell on the other side of it. Yet another crunching sound was heard. "Where did he get the potato chips?" Shikaku Nara finally asked. At the question, the two guards exchanged a look. They were obviously embarrassed by something. "We don't know, sir," one of the pair admitted, sheepishly. "We got distracted for just 1 second, and, well, he pulled them out from somewhere." The guards swallowed loudly, expecting their superior to get mad and chew them out for having allowed such a thing. For all they knew, the prisoner could have hidden on his person something much more dangerous than a pack of potato chips. Instead, Shikaku Nara turned to walk towards the door, a small smile on his lips. "Sir, aren't you going to interrogate the prisoner?" one of the two guards asked. "There's no need for that," was the only reply he received before the Jonin commander disappeared into the corridor. Inside the cell, another potato chip was crushed by a voracious mandible. "Kuchios!" Two different voices yelled a mile outside of Konoha's gates. The smoke dissipated and the small clearing where Orochimaru and Jiraiya were standing was now evenly covered by snakes and toads, none of them bigger than a palm. Both sides tensed when they saw each other, because a long-time rivalry existed between both cold-blooded kinds. Thankfully, they noticed their summoners quickly and stayed put, waiting for instructions. If there was one thing Orochimaru didn't need, it was trying to stop a fight between slithering and jumping animal summons. "Listen now, all you snakes," he spoke. Orochimaru heard Jiraiya addressing his summons in a similar way. "I have summoned here for an important task, which could require some time to be accomplished. We are going to track down Tsunade Senju's whereabouts." There was an immediate reaction, with the small serpents coming closer, asking questions, demanding more details. Orochimaru slightly raised a hand to silence them, before continuing. "You will divide yourself in 2 groups. One will start to search at east, and the other will go south. The toads will go north and west." Various scaly heads nodded at that. Nobody of them wanted to be teamed up with the slimy overgrown frogs. Especially for a long time. "Stay hidden. You must not be spotted, even after the mission is completed. Especially not by Tsunade," he continued, emphasizing the last part. "Orochimaru-sama," hissed one of the younger snakes. "Why do we have to conceal ourselves from Tsunadeheim? Isn't she one of our allies? Just follow my instructions exactly, instead of asking useless questions," he seethed. The small snake retreated, lowering itself in a sign of submission. Should you be in danger of being spotted, retreat immediately. Should you not be able to retreat, dispel immediately. Should you find any clue to Tsunade's location, inform me, or Jiraiya. Yes, he added before anyone could protest, even Jiraiya, should I be unable or not in condition to listen to your report. At that, all the snakes stiffened, just as Orochimaru expected. Is this mission really that dangerous, Orochimaru-sama? One of the snakes in the first rows asked. Aren't they all? He responded sardonically. Now, go. Moving in unison, the various reptiles slithered away, starting their search for the slug princess in their half of the fire country. The toad left too, directed to the other half. Orochimaru and Jiraiya were alone. After the discussion with Minato Brat, they had decided to depart immediately. Orochimaru had had barely the time to go back to his house or laboratory, depending on who you asked, to grab the necessary supplies for the journey, before heading towards the village's gates. He frowned at the memory. Finding Anko still sleeping on the couch hadn't amused him one bit. Had the brat even woken up once in the whole day? He turned towards his teammate, who was standing motionless, watching the direction the toads had left off. Jiraiya, he said, are you alright? Are you worried about me, now? The toad Sannin snorted, not turning to face him. Of course not, he replied. You're a shinobi. You will manage, with time. But you can't get distracted on this task. Do you understand? Yes, I do, Jiraiya said grimly as he started to walk. Come on, snake face. Let's go hunt down our old friend. We should ask the moneylenders of Tenzaku-gai first. Orochimaru opened his equipment pouch and checked once last time the item he had prepared. His ace in the sleeve, in case Tsunade proved to be hostile. A small part of him was still shaken from the experience of that afternoon, hoped that he would not be forced to use it. Hope had never been a shinobi's ally in his book. Are you coming or not? We're wasting time. Jiraiya yelled from afar. Orochimaru closed the small pouch and followed his teammate. No chance he would let that fat toad to lead the way. Shikamaru Nara was slouched in his chair, watching the ceiling of the interrogation room he had been conducted to exactly 32 minutes ago. After having quite a lot of chakra-suppressing seals placed on his body, he was bored out of his mind. By his assessment, at least 10 hours had passed since their capture in the morning. Nobody had asked him any questions yet. He imagined they wanted to interrogate the others first. Probably Naruto. He was sure that Naruto had caused quite a racket. But since Konoha was still standing, the troublesome blonde had either calmed down or he had been subdued. Or killed. That was still a possibility, no matter how powerful he was. Shikamaru was on the point of counting the room's tiles just to pass the time, again, when he heard the door opening. He straightened up, maintaining a bored expression. Inwardly he was struggling, but as Kiba found out at the party, he had a great poker face, just below Gaara in size. His father had just entered the room, carrying something under his arm. He was mostly sure that the man was indeed his father. During the attack he had made some different theories. The man was not an Edo Tensei, he knew the clan's trademark Kagemain no Jutsu, and it was impossible for the whole thing to be a genjutsu, because it was too crazy. Genjutsu used to trick an opponent tended to make sense. So he decided to gamble, and surrendered. He hoped it would pay off. The man sat in front of him, placing the item he was carrying in the middle of the table and just stared at him. It was a shogi board. Shikamaru met his father's eyes, cocking his eyebrow. He just received a cold, calculating look, which was a little unsettling when it was plastered on the face of his parent. Ah, so troublesome, are we going to play or what? Shikamaru said, scratching his head. His father's reply was a simple gesture, an invitation towards the board accompanied by a smug smile. Sighing, Shikamaru reached for the board and began to set the pieces on their starting positions. Why? His father asked. Why what? He counter-asked as he finished his task. Why choose black? Troublesome, muttered Shikamaru. It's just that my father used to play white all the time. Very well, I'll move first then, Shikaku said. He made his opening move, with the pawn at the center of his starting lineup. The prisoner countered with a similar move, but on the side of the board. Even the motion for relocate the token was done lazily. The sharp clack of the wooden pieces echoed in the cell. So, what's your name? He was asked. Shikaku moved another pawn, on the opposite side of the board. Shikamaru, he said, as he advanced on the center. Once again, it was a simple pawn. Just Shikamaru. No family? The Nara clan head inquired, scratching his chin as he observed the board. Shikamaru snorted. Last until the end of this game, and maybe I'll tell you my family name, he said with a challenging tone. Shikaku met Shikamaru's gaze, and for a while both shinobi ignored the board, locked in a duel of wills. Fine, his father declared, you've got a deal, Shikamaru. Another pawn was moved, forming a defensive line with its comrade. As the game progressed, the evening did as well. Especially because the two players took their time between each move. For a while, the only sound in the small room was that of the pieces clacking on the board. So far they had both made the normal opening moves, nothing really brilliant or risky. You have some strange companions, Shikaku claimed as he waited for Shikamaru's move. You have no idea, he said in a bored tone as once again he moved the pawn on his right side. Narrowing his eyes, probably irritated by having his unspoken question ignored, Shikaku moved a bishop. It was the first decisive move of the game. So far everything had been defensive, cautious. But this was an undeniable act of aggression. Are you ready to give it your all? Shikaku asked with fire in his eyes. He was grinning. Shikamaru's only answer was to straighten up his posture once again. And to move a rook. The white pieces countered with a rook of their own. A black knight followed. The game was now at a critical phase. The first real exchange, the moves where both sides would start to lose pieces, and strategies would change accordingly. But it wouldn't be Shikaku who drew first blood. His last move had been too evasive. Shikamaru knew that his father wanted him to attack first. It was a way to test him, to evaluate him. Well then, time to surprise the old man. A pawn rested in front of him, cut off from its lines and ripe for the picking. Shikamaru just ignored the blatant opening, moving his bishop into a strategically unimportant tile on the far end of the board. Shikaku frowned when his opponent deftly ignored the bait he had provided. He imitated him and made a move that didn't accomplish anything and didn't give him an advantage. For a while the two players didn't speak with words. They spoke with the pieces, every movement carrying meaning beyond what could be expressed out loud. The pawns should have already been decimated by this time, but Shikamaru was ignoring them, and Shikaku was as well. Rooks were completely dismissing vulnerable prey. Knights were bypassing the enemy instead of attacking. Shikaku's eyes met his own. Shikamaru was keeping a carefully blank face, while the elder man's eyes narrowed. His evasive maneuvers and careful placement on the board were sending a clear message. I mean you no harm. What were you and your companions doing before arriving in Konoha? Shikaku asked while stroking his chin, having observed the board for some minutes. We were celebrating the return of a friend, Shikamaru replied, caressing one of his pawns. Was he away? The Jonin commander questioned, raising an eyebrow and moving another piece. Troublesome. Shikamaru sighed. Yeah, he's quite important. A black bishop moved into a white knight's range. It wasn't an attack, right? The other man asked, ignoring his knight ready to strike and moving a pawn. It wasn't, Shikamaru confirmed. A piece slid into place. We have no idea how we got here. I would like to believe you, Shikaku replied. But there are too many coincidences, too many questions, and then there are the Uchiha and the Hyuga who appeared out of nowhere. A white rook moved at the center of the board. Shikamaru smirked. Draw, he said. His tone, however, was the one that would have been expected out of someone declaring checkmate. Shikaku looked at the board, and gaped. The pieces at the center of the shogi board were arranged in a perfect Konoha leaf. The elder man could only stare, shock quite visible on his face. He had been outplayed, beaten at his own game. His opponent would have had to plan hundreds of different scenarios that changed with every move to pull this off. Who are you? Shikaku whispered. My name, his opponent grinned, is Shikamaru Nara. Utter silence, until Shikaku shook his head with a dumbfounded expression adorning his features. Where are you from? The older Nara asked, with a low voice. Depends. What year is it? Shikaku's head snapped up, meeting Shikamaru's bored eyes. But Shikamaru could see that glint in the man's eyes. Something had clicked, the puzzle pieces had come together. You're from the future, aren't you? Yeah. Are you my son? Yeah. There was a long pause as the older man digested that information. The blonde one is Minato's? Yeah. Troublesome. I know. This time, the pause was longer than the previous one. Judging from his father's expression, it was obvious that he was understanding the implications of what had happened. How did you arrive here? He finally asked. I have no idea, Shika replied, shrugging. So, what happens now? You realize that I will need more solid proof than your word for it. Especially if I want to. Wooden box on the shelf, Shikamaru interrupted, smirking. Shikaku froze, staring at his son's amused expression. I'll ask for blood tests right away. That should be enough to persuade the Hokage, the older Nara said, trying to not blush. You need a better hiding place, you know. Kushina had passed some time after Jiraiya's departure to Minato's office studying the giant seal. Then she started to simply look at it. Then she started a game of noticing the funny forms the seal arrays assumed every time they shifted or morphed. She was bored. A bored Uzumaki was not a good thing. She was also suffering a slight sugar withdrawal, and she felt slightly bad for not telling Jiraiya about Pinky, that kunoichi who had fought her using Tsunade's signature techniques. She had informed Minato, of course. It was he who had asked Kushina to not tell Jiraiya, at least until more intel was extracted from the prisoners. She was sure that the reason Minato had summoned his sensei into his office was to inform him about the interrogation's results. She liked the old pervert when he wasn't acting like a pervert and had decided to practically adopt him in her future family. But he had better not try to organize a bachelor party for her future husband. She would ask Shikaku to do it, no doubt. Kushina prayed that Tsunade was not implicated in anything. There had to be an explanation. Yes, of course there was one. There was no way that Tsunade would have teached her secrets to an enemy of the village. Even if she had been away for years, rarely visiting at all. Not a chance she was a traitor. Because if that was the case, it would destroy Jiraiya's spirit. Great, she muttered. Now I'm in a bad mood, too. That was it. Since she was tired of being alone in a room with a gigantic swirling seal as her only companion, she decided to explore the building, which was completely empty, save for sake bottles and the furnished attic where Minato had fought Mini Minato. Not interested in empty bottles at all, and interested in the invaders instead, she went immediately for the staircase. She had no idea how the interrogations were going, but there were too many incongruencies and jumbled facts about the prisoners that contradicted each other. It was really bugging her and she could only imagine how Minato was frustrated by the whole situation. Maybe with a little luck she could be helpful. And relieving her boredom was a nice bonus. As she finally arrived to the last floor, she heard a girl's screams. Damn you Masahiro Nii. There will be a reckoning. Masahiro had a sister. Who knew? Peeking inside the attic's entrance, she saw a giant pile of sake bottles. Each of them was wrapped in a plastic bag with a name tag on it. Besides that, the room looked like an ordinary apartment's atrium, occupied by 4 shinobi teens who were apparently really peeved by their duties. Well, the Uchiha girl seemed annoyed. Kakashi and his team, not so much. Kushina, the young silver-haired boy greeted. What are you doing here? Hi. She saluted, feeling all the eyes on herself. I was bored down in the seal's room, and I decided to take a look. May I come in? Sure, why not? The boy simply shrugged. Hey! This is a crime scene. Masahiro's sister protested. What was her name? So what? She's part of the team investigating the seal, and this is still a joint operation, Asuma stated, adding his own 2 cents to the discussion. I suppose, the girl said, hesitantly. But, so. What's this pile of bottles? Kushina interrupted, not wanting to give the girl time to reconsider. Evidence, they all stated. Kurenai grumbled a little at that. Are these all the bottles that were on this floor? The red-haired woman asked. No, only the ones inside the attic, we have just finished cleaning it, Asuma clarified. You mean collected the evidence, the Uchiha girl precised. Yeah, that. Anyway, we just finished collecting it. We haven't even checked for other stuff yet. Oh, can I help? Kushina asked, grinning. But, let her help, Ayumi. Even if you said no, she would do it anyway. I know that look on her face, Kakashi interrupted evenly. Just for that remark, Kushina was tempted to pinch the boy's cheek and embarrass him in front of the other teens, but she was able to refrain from it. Barely. She could do it later, maybe in front of Minato. She wanted to check the apartment for clues. And a way to distract herself. Jumping over the bottle pile, she started to stride in the enormous apartment. Who needed such a big place, anyway? So, what's interesting around here? She asked to nobody in particular. Besides the kitchen full of dirty dishes, the only interesting things are the bedroom and the living room that was destroyed by Minato-sensei's fight. We found a large cabinet full of boxes. We could check them, and you. No way. I'm getting the mystery boxes all for myself. She declared. You can have the dirty dishes, Kakashi-kun. She could heard the teen's resigned sigh as she strolled around, before coming to a complete stop. She turned back, and saw that Kakashi was looking at her with a vague expression of curiosity. Kakashi-kun, where's the cabinet? Shaking, Kakashi indicated silently the direction to her. It was the opposite way she had started to wander. She thanked Kakashi and practically raced towards it. In front of her was standing a simple white door, with a handwritten sign that was saying, "Don't touch my stuff," on it. Yeah, well, not going to work, whoever you are, she said in a completely unapologetic tone as she opened it. Kushina stopped in shock. The room was huge. Well, too big to be called a closet. An entire bedroom could be placed here, if necessary. And a good part of it was covered by various stuff, furnishing and cardboard boxes and scrolls, all amassed apparently at random into it. Well, in that aspect it really looked like a cabinet. Like hers, at least. She went immediately to check the scrolls, and she was sure to have found a piece of the enigma about the seal when she noticed it was a Fuinjutsu scroll. But her hopes were quickly crushed. It was a scroll that contained basic knowledge, nothing really advanced. It was like looking at a Fuinjutsu spelling book. Nothing a seal master like those who had created that complex bunch of arrays would carry around. But as she put it down, she noticed an opened box laying in a corner with various scrolls sprouting from it. She immediately checked those, too. Theory, basic stuff, list of things a seal user should avoid to do unless they want to die painfully because of their own mistakes. Basic stuff, and a list of things that after centuries of practice were now considered impossible to obtain even with very advanced Fuinjutsu. Weird. Was someone of the enemy seal masters going to teach the basics to someone of their minions, perhaps? She digged in to search for a few more clues about the scrolls. She could feel something under them, a book. No wait, lots of books. She pulled on one, and after taking it out, examined the cover. It was copy of Ika. She threw it away by reflex, shocked beyond belief. What was a pervert book like that doing inside a box in their enemy's teleporting stronghold? When the shock had passed, she carefully removed all the scrolls from the top of the box. She couldn't believe her eyes. Almost every book into it was a copy of an Ika volume. There were even some she didn't know existed, like Ika Tactics. Not that she had actually read them. She just knew the titles because Jiraiya tended to gravitate around her, being her fiancé's sensei and all that. Was one of the enemies a fan? That would explain it. She reminded herself to tell the news to the pervert, maybe it would cheer him up. But not all the books were Ika, apparently. She took out a very old, and worn-out small booklet. Why was it here? Then she saw the title, Tale of a Gutsy Shinobi. Yep, that was it. Definitely a fan. And this was the favorite, if she had to judge by the state of the cover. Just how many times had the guy, or girl, read it? It looked like decades old. She put it back carefully, not wanting to damage it. It was probably the only book actually worthy of being called, well, a book, in the whole box. There was another one, though, that wasn't an Ika volume. She didn't remember that Jiraiya had written another one, so she decided to check. Opening the cover, her eyes were drawn to a handwritten dedication. Naruto, she read. So the guy shared the name of the hero in the book. I hope you like this. I tried to put all the old photos I could find here. They would be proud of you, as I am Kaka-sensei. Kaka? Weird name. Well, like Naruto, actually. Strange coincidence, being named after the hero of a book that had been published a few years ago. Maybe that was the reason was reading Jiraiya's works. She turned the page, and her blood froze. It was a photo album, not a book, like the dedication said. But the subjects were her and Minato, back in their academy days. What was going on? She started to flip around the pages. The whole album was full of pictures of the two of them. Sometimes alone, especially in their teen years, sometimes together, as friends. And as a couple. Were they spying on them? She swore, when she found this Kaka-sensei, she would rip his eyes out of his. She reached the last page. She saw the last picture. Her eyes widened. The album fell from her hands. What was going on? Canary was standing in the barely lit room, contemplating his rotten luck. He had never been the luckiest shinobi around, quite the contrary actually. But this day had taken the cake, and entered in his personal top 5 of the universe is screwing with Canary days. It wasn't like it was actually his fault if things went wrong around him. Like when the floor collapsed under his feet. Especially when the floor collapsed under his feet. He had just walked on it, that's what floors were for. And he had been knocked unconscious by the rubble. How come that it was his head that had got the worst of it, instead of his mask? Not that he wanted his mask to be damaged. He was an ANBU, and ANBU didn't want their masks to be damaged. But surely it could have at least tried to protect him face from all those falling bricks. No matter how justified his failures could be. He knew that in the end, today, he had screwed up. So he had been assigned some menial and demeaning jobs as punishment. Assisting the blonde prisoner in his needs had been particularly humiliating. But at least he was still in ANBU. Immediately after he had cleaned up, he had been assigned another task. So now he was standing in a cell with a comatose prisoner, guarding her constantly as per the orders. He could barely think that this girl with pink hair had been able to go head to toe against the red-haired habanero. In the end, the last Uzumaki had to stop the girl by covering her with so many suppressive seals that had left in a vegetative state. So as long as the seals were in place, Canary had nothing to worry about. Wait. Was that seal glowing? Yes, the seal on the prisoner's forehead was glowing slightly, at intermittent paces. Seal tags were not supposed to glow, unless they were explosive tags, and even in that case they glowed for a brief moment before detonating. He shivered. Could it be possible that Kushina Uzumaki, a seal master, had somehow made an error when she made that seal in the middle of the fight and it was going to explode at any moment? With the luck he had, he would not exclude this possibility. Since he didn't want to explain why the prisoner's head had exploded, which was not even the worst-case scenario he was imagining, he decided to check the seal. But he was ready to dive for cover, just in case. As he approached, the seal glowed again, brighter this time. He shrunk away, thinking he was done for. But the room had not exploded, and neither had the prisoner's head. Which was good. Finally checking the seal at a close distance, he could now feel a feeble chakra flare, that kept to be pushed down by the seal suppressor seals. But it kept coming back. Was the prisoner pushing her chakra against the seal? That shouldn't even be possible. Maybe the seal wasn't properly placed. He reached the small tag and started to tap it in various points with his fingers, to be sure that it was actually sticking to the prisoner's forehead. It was then that 2 green eyes snapped open. That's it for part 3. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.